Hello everyone, a very good evening and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome back to another session on international relations. So last week we covered many important topics from India and its neighborhood. So today let's begin by looking at some previous year's questions. In the last class I had promised to discuss few prelims and mains questions from previous question papers. So let's pick up some questions from topics that we have studied. I'll give you an opportunity to answer the questions as well. And once we complete this, we shall talk about two important regional groupings from the South Asia region, that's from around India's neighborhood. So let's begin with the first question. The first question from 2011. This question was asked in the 2011 prelims paper. Please read the question carefully. I will be launching the poll and let's see how many of you can get it right. The question says, Southeast Asia has captivated the attention of global community over space and time. It has captivated the attention of the global community as a geostrategically significant region. And which amongst the following is the most convincing explanation for this global perspective? So this is actually an analytical question. Of course, we haven't covered Southeast Asia region as of now, but I have mentioned Southeast Asia when discussing some relevant topics. So please give it an attempt. Let's see how many of you can answer this question. The options are: it was the hot theater during Second World War, its location between Asian powers of India and China, it was the arena of superpower confrontation during Cold War period, its location between Indian and Pacific Oceans, and its preeminent maritime character. So let me launch the poll. I'll give you 15 seconds. Let's see how many of you can get the right answer. The poll is live. Start giving your answers and then I'll discuss the question. I'll explain why I've chosen this. I'll also explain how to approach such questions in prelims. All right. 62% of them have given the right answer. Very good. So that is the leaderboard in front of you. So Venkat, Sai, Dinesh, Harsh are at the top three. Very good. I'm really happy that 62% of you have got the right answer. See, this question is not a straightforward factual question. It's actually very analytical in nature. You can answer this question only when you understand the significance of Southeast Asia region. The question is saying that Southeast Asia as a region has been geostrategically significant through space and time. That is, with regard to its location in the Indo-Pacific, it has always been significant, irrespective of the time period. Be it in medieval times, in modern history, right, during the Cold War period, even in today's geopolitics, Southeast Asia has always been very significant geostrategically. So, what is the most convincing explanation? Some of the given explanations might be correct, but you should choose the most convincing explanation. Was it the hot theater during Second World War? To an extent, yes. To an extent, it is correct. But that can't be the most convincing explanation. It does not explain why Southeast Asia is significant today. It does not explain why Southeast Asia was significant even before the world wars. So this cannot be the most convincing explanation. Second statement says it's located between India and China. Again, it's partially correct. Yes, Southeast Asia is between India and China. That makes the region significant. Historically, this was one reason why Southeast Asia was significant. Even today, in today's geopolitics, Southeast Asia remains relevant because of its location between India and China. But is it the most convincing explanation? No. Because option D is the most convincing explanation. Option C is absurd. It says it was the arena of superpower confrontation during Cold War. That wasn't really the case. Of course, Cold War between US and Soviet Union did have a global impact in almost every region and in every country. There was a geopolitical rivalry going on between US and Soviet Union. But that didn't make Southeast Asia the most significant region geostrategically. That's why I said it's an absurd statement. You can eliminate C. B is in a way correct, but that can't be the most convincing explanation because there is a better statement, that is option D. Southeast Asia has been geostrategically significant throughout history and with regard to its geography as well, because of its location in the Indo-Pacific and because of its preeminent maritime character. It's because the region has been significant for trade. The region has been significant for cultural relations. The region has seen many wars and conflicts. So its preeminent maritime character in the Indo-Pacific is what makes the region significant geostrategically throughout space and time. All right. So if you can understand this logic, you can easily get the correct answer. Now let's look at the second question from the same paper, from the first prelims paper in 2011. That is when the new prelims format was introduced. That's why I'm picking some questions from here. Read this question. With reference to Lookie's policy of India, consider the following statements. India wants to establish itself as an important regional player in East Asian affairs. India wants to plug the vacuum created by the termination of Cold War. India wants to restore the historical cultural ties with its neighbors in Southeast and East Asia. So which of the given statements are correct? I'll be launching the poll. 15 seconds of time. Let's see how many of you get it right. Again, it's a topic that I've just mentioned. We will discuss this in detail. I'll have a separate class for Look East, Act East policy and Southeast Asia region. But let's see how many of you can get it right based on a basic understanding. 63% have said option B. Let's see the leaderboard. These are the students who gave the correct answer and the quickest answer. 63% have said option B is correct. You guys are absolutely right. As I mentioned in previous classes, Look East policy of India was focused on improving our ties with Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. Right? So the first statement is obviously correct. Under this policy, we have tried establishing ourselves as a major regional player, even in the East Asia region, towards Japan and Korea. The third statement is also correct because we have tried restoring our historical cultural ties with Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries. So both the statements are correct and option B becomes the right answer. Next, from the 2015 paper, a straightforward question from current affairs. This is a question directly picked from current affairs. I've chosen this question because it gives an idea as to what kind of factual current affairs questions can come. It may not be related to any particular topic, but from the miscellaneous section, based on organizations which are in news, UPSC can ask such straightforward questions. So this question is related to Amnesty International. So what is Amnesty International? There are four options given. Let's see how many of you can answer this right. I've given 15 seconds again, and the poll is live. Please, all of you try to attempt this question, because I've mentioned Amnesty International in one of the discussions that we had last week. I hope you guys remember where I mentioned Amnesty International. 42% have said option B is correct. You guys are right again. Very good. This is the leaderboard. You can take a look. 32% have said option A. All right, that's quite a significant number. It means still many of you are getting it wrong. Option A is incorrect because Amnesty International is not a UN agency. It's not a UN agency. It does not provide help to refugees of civil wars. So that's why option A is completely incorrect. I had mentioned that Amnesty International is a global human rights organization. It's a global NGO. It's a non-government organization working in the field of human rights. That's why option B is correct. Option C is incorrect. It says it's an NGO, but here it is mentioned that it is helping poor people. That is not the objective of Amnesty International. Neither is D. Amnesty International is a very popular human rights organization. It's an NGO. It's a non-government entity, right? Protecting and upholding human rights around the world. You have another human rights organization known as HRW. Human Rights Watch. These organizations are frequently in news. If you read Hindu or Indian Express, particularly in the international section, right, with regard to wars, conflicts, disasters, refugee situations, many such organizations will be mentioned. So please make a note of these names. Read the basic points about these institutions. You have organizations like Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, which was asked in a similar question in 2016 question paper. MSF stands for Medicine Sans Frontiers. So what is it? What kind of organization is this? Is it a division of WHO, a non-governmental international organization, an intergovernmental agency sponsored by European Union, a specialized agency of the UN? All right, I'll launch the poll. Let's see how many of you can answer this. If you guys have been reading newspapers carefully and spending some time in researching about such institutions and organizations, you will be able to get these answers right. These are actually very simple, straightforward questions. 48% have given the right answer. Take a look at the leaderboard again. Nutan, Pratyaksh and Taran Sharma are at the top. 48% said that option B is correct. You're absolutely right. MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, is a global NGO that provides medical assistance in war zones, in areas hit by civil wars or disasters. In any kind of distress situation where people are injured or killed, in such a hostile environment, this NGO works to provide medical support and medical assistance. They are world renowned because they treat everyone. They don't distinguish. They don't distinguish between two parties who are fighting. Even if it's a terrorist organization, right? Even if a terrorist is injured, the terrorist will be treated as well on medical grounds, on humanitarian grounds. This is the uniqueness about Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, Medicine Sans Frontiers. All right, it's not a division of WHO. It's not sponsored by European Union. It's not part of the UN. It's a global NGO again, working in the field of medical assistance in war zones, conflict hit areas, and disaster hit areas. There's another organization known as the White Helmets. Please read about them. I want you to take it up as an exercise. Read about the White Helmets. All right? Understand a few basic points about such organizations because they're often mentioned in news. Now let's see one more question from 2016 itself. This is a match the following type of question. So such questions can also be asked. It's not just straightforward factual questions, but match the following type of questions can also be asked. On the left, we have a list of native communities or ethnic groups matched with countries where they might be found. So you have to check which of them are correctly matched. All right, I'll launch the poll. I'll give you 30 seconds this time because it's a match the following type of question. You may need a little more time. So you need to check how many of them are correctly matched. Let's see how many of you can get it right. The poll is live. You have 30 seconds. Read carefully. We have discussed and covered at least a few of these communities. I hope most of you to get it right. 15 seconds to go. Please give your answer not in the comments, but here in the poll. Let's see how many of you can get it right. 5 seconds more left. All right. 81% have said option C. Very good. 2 and 3 are correctly matched. We discussed under India, Nepal, that the Madhes community can be found in the Terai region of Nepal. We spoke about the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, right? So both are correctly matched. The first one is incorrectly matched. The Kurds are not found in Bangladesh. Any idea? Can you tell me in the comments where you can find the Kurd community? Can anyone tell me in the comments where you can find the Kurds? Iran, Turkey, Syria, Iraq. Very good. They are found in parts of Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. The Kurd community is also frequently in news because they are fighting to establish their own country known as Kurdistan. There are few Kurdish militant organizations waging a war against Turkey. In fact, Turkey targets the Kurd militant organizations because these Kurdish groups are trying to liberate parts of Turkey and few other areas to form their own country known as Kurdistan. That's one reason why the Kurd community is frequently in news. Recently, the Kurds were in news because the United States was working with the Kurd militant organizations to target the Islamic State, the ISIS, which had established a stronghold in Iraq and Syria. When US was targeting ISIS in Iraq and Syria, the CIA of the United States, the American intelligence agency, worked closely with Kurd militant outfits to target ISIS in the Iraq-Syria region, right? So such communities, ethnic groups can also be in news frequently. So please ensure you know where they are found, in which regions, in which countries. Are there any geopolitical issues connected to them? Such basic general awareness is very, very important. All right. One last question, one last prelims question for today. Again from 2016 paper. This is just to show you sometimes questions can be very simple, right? You don't really have to scratch your head. I'm sure many of you will know the answer. Belt and Road Initiative seen in news is in the context of awareness of which country or which organization. I don't even have to launch the poll for this. I'm sure 90% of you, 99% of you will get this right. Because throughout last week, I was mentioning Belt and Road Initiative again and again. We'll discuss this as well in this week's classes. The correct answer is, of course, China, option D. It's a very ambitious connectivity project of China. It's also known as One Belt, One Road Project, OBOR project, right? It's another name for Belt and Road Initiative. So this is the kind of questions you can expect in your prelims. Some are straightforward factual, some are analytical, requiring conceptual understanding. There could be match the following type of questions. There could be 3-4 statements given, and you need to check which of the statements are correct or how many statements are correct. Is that clear? If you look at the 2022 and 2023 paper, the latest papers, right? New format of questions are being asked where statements are given. You need to check whether they are correct, whether the assertion and reasoning are correct, or statements are given. You have to check how many of them are correct. Those questions become more challenging because you can't rely on the elimination method, right? So you can become better at answering these questions with, of course, revision and practice. This is the key. More revision and more practice. Revise whatever you have studied multiple times. Practice as many question papers as possible. Cover all the prelims question papers from 2011 till 2023. Right? You have around 13, right? 13 question papers. Cover all the question papers. Answer all the questions. That's the best way to practice. Then anyways, you'll have your test series where we will help you cover different subjects and full length papers as well. So by the time you take your exam next year, you should have attempted a good 25 to 30 question papers. Right? That gives you a good hold on the subject and it helps you in your revision as well. All right. So these are some questions I wanted to show for today. I think this should be enough. We'll come back to this again after a few classes. We'll discuss some mains questions as well next time. I have picked up a few mains questions as well. So there we can discuss answer writing. Right? I'll tell you how you can approach answer writing in international relations. So let's do it next week. Let's cover a few more topics and chapters this week. And we'll again pick up a discussion on questions. I will show you some prelims and as well as mains questions and discuss answer writing as well. Is that clear? I hope you guys have got a fair idea today, and we'll do this exercise again next week and maybe once at the end as well. So we will cover as many questions as possible. So today, Let's begin the discussion with two important regional groupings. I will be discussing two important regional groupings in India's neighborhood. I feel this is the right time to discuss some regional groupings because we have almost completed half of India's relations with its neighboring countries. All right, so before we proceed further with Pakistan, China, and others, I feel that we should cover two important groupings from the South Asia Bay of Bengal region. So we shall talk about the SAARC organization, which is focused on South Asia, where India is located. And we shall also discuss another important grouping known as BIMSTEC, which is centered around the Bay of Bengal region. Is that clear? So over the next 30 to 35 minutes, I plan to complete these two important groupings. I will be writing down several important points. I have deliberately not added these groupings in the PPT. In the PPT, you will not find any notes. So I expect you guys to write down the points as and when I discuss. I'll write down the points as well. You'll have the annotations for later. But along with me, please jot down the key points I'll be discussing. Is that clear? So let's begin with SAARC. SAARC stands for South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It's a regional body, meaning it consists of members from that particular region. That's what you mean by a regional organization. You have similar organizations like European Union, African Union, ASEAN. All these are regional organizations, meaning they are specifically focused on a particular region. They bring the countries of that region together to promote cooperation between the countries present in that region. So for South Asia, where India is located, which is our neighborhood, the primary regional body is the SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. When was this organization established? Any idea? Does anyone know when SAARC was set up? I will be discussing some facts for your prelims, and there is some analysis as well for your mains. I'll be covering both. So try and help me with the facts. Let's make it a little interactive. 2005, 1992, 2014, 1985, 1987. I'm getting all the years here. The correct answer is 1985. SAARC was established in the year 1985 at Dhaka in Bangladesh. The South Asian countries came together. They held the Dhaka summit to promote regional cooperation among South Asian countries. And in 1985, they established this organization called the SAARC. And who are the members? Of course, India is the leader of the organization. We are the biggest and most influential power within the SAARC grouping. Next would be Pakistan. After India, Pakistan is the most powerful, influential member of this organization, followed by all the other South Asian countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives. Maldives is also part of South Asia, and Bangladesh. These were the member countries. These were the 7 countries which established the SAARC grouping in the year 1985. Is that clear? What is the objective of this organization? Please write down this point. Its primary objective is to work towards regional and economic integration of South Asia. This is the priority of SAARC, to achieve regional and economic integration. I'll explain what it means. So after functioning for a few years and after a few achievements. Later, a new member was added to the organization. Another country from the region was added as a full-time member. Any idea which country joined the SARC later? Which was the country added after 1985, many years after 1985? China, Iran. The correct answer is Afghanistan. Afghanistan became the 8th member of the group. Afghanistan is also seen as a South Asian country because India believes that we share boundaries with Afghanistan. Of course, that territory is occupied illegally by Pakistan, right? In Jammu and Kashmir, in Gilgit-Baltistan. Indian territory is under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. But officially, we claim the whole of J&K to belong to India. And accordingly, we share boundaries with Afghanistan, right? So we see Afghanistan as a South Asian country. And India, Afghanistan had very good relations with the Afghan government, especially from 2001 to 2021. During these 20 years, Afghanistan was ruled by a civilian government. Recently, before Taliban took over, right, in 2021, Taliban captured power again in Afghanistan. Before that, we had a friendly civilian government from 2001 to 2021 with whom India had established very close relations. So at India's insistence, we brought Afghanistan as a new member and it joined the grouping as the 8th member country. Is that clear? There are many observers who have been added to the organization as well. There are many observer states. There are a total of 9 observers at SARC. Now, some of you might have a doubt. What's the difference between a member country and an observer country? See, members have all the rights. Members to an organization, they will have full rights, meaning they can bring up an issue, they can table a resolution, all right? They can participate in the debate, and more importantly, they can vote. They will have voting rights as well. Whereas observers, they simply observe. They are invited by the member countries to participate, observe the proceedings. They can maybe give suggestions and participate in debates, but they will not have voting powers. That is the primary difference. Observers can't bring resolutions. They can't initiate a discussion. They simply come as a guest country. Their diplomats will observe the gathering. They'll participate in the debate and discussion if invited, but they can't initiate a debate or bring an issue or table a resolution, and definitely they'll not have voting rights. That is the primary difference between a member country and an observer state. Is that clear? So there are 8 members today, 7 plus 1. There are 8 member countries in SARC and there are 9 observers. Which are the observers? China, Australia, Japan, South Korea, European Union and United States, Iran, Myanmar, and Mauritius. These are the observers to SARC. All right? US and European Union are part of it. China, Japan, Australia, and South Korea. Iran, Myanmar, and Mauritius. So 9 observers are part of the SARC. Got it? Now coming to the objective of the group. What do you mean by achieving regional and economic integration? SARC as a grouping has tried to improve connectivity in order to bring the region closer, that is to integrate the region. It has tried to create economic integration as well. Now, how can you achieve regional and economic integration? How can you bring the region closer? How can you bridge the gaps and connect the economies and the people? How can you do that? You can achieve this integration by signing free trade agreements, by working on connectivity projects. This is how you integrate a region. Is that clear? You set up a customs union, right, where you create common taxes, a common taxation system for imports, or you sign free trade agreements, FTAs, where you reduce the tax barriers, you remove the non-tariff barriers as well, and improve the movement of people and goods. When you provide for free movement of people, goods, services, and investments, that is when you truly integrate a region. Now, that is what European countries have done through European Union, right? They've abolished their border controls. They have created common currencies. They have common policies in place, including common taxes, right? They've created a free trade zone. Look at ASEAN countries. Even they have achieved integration within their region by signing free trade agreements, by creating a free trade area, and by promoting the free movement of people, goods, services, and investments. They have built key connectivity projects, roadway projects, railway lines. They've improved air and maritime connectivity. So, by investing in such initiatives, countries can bring the region closer and achieve true integration of the region. Essentially, you erase your national borders as much as possible, relax the border controls, facilitate the easy flow of people between the countries, and promote the trade between these countries. This is the focus of any regional organization. Is that clear? So, groupings like European Union, ASEAN, they have achieved significant integration of their respective regions. Whereas, on the other hand, SAARC is seen as largely a failure. SAARC as a grouping has largely failed in achieving this objective. Despite the best efforts being taken up, it has not achieved regional and economic integration. Now, this is what we need to understand. Why is SAARC seen as a failure? Why is that there is an opinion that SAARC is a failed organization? In fact, believe it or not, India itself does not pay much attention to SAARC today. India has started neglecting SAARC from few years. So the reason is SAARC as a grouping has not achieved anything constructive. It has a few achievements to its list, but by and large, it has failed in its core objective, which was to achieve regional and economic integration. So if you look at the previous achievements, it does have some achievements to its credit, but the failures are more. So let's make a comparison, and I'll explain why SAARC has not really succeeded in achieving regional and economic integration. Over the years, SAARC countries, they have succeeded in establishing a SAARC food bank. This is one successful initiative to provide for food security, especially for the poor South Asian countries. To ensure food security and tackle hunger, a SAARC food bank has been set up. They have signed a free trade agreement called SAFTA in 2006, but it is not effective. It is largely non-operational. They did sign a free trade agreement. When this FTA was signed, it was seen as a big achievement, but it hasn't helped in reducing the trade barriers. It hasn't helped in reducing the taxes and in improving trade between these member countries. So SAFTA, even though this free trade agreement was signed, it is largely ineffective and non-operational. The other achievement of SAARC was the establishment of a SAARC Disaster Management Center. There is a dedicated disaster management center of SAARC, which has relatively been successful because South Asian countries are affected by multiple disasters, from earthquakes to floods to tsunamis to landslides to cyclones, right? All the South Asian countries face the full impact of natural disasters, be it India, be it Sri Lanka, be it Bangladesh or Pakistan or Nepal, right? They're all vulnerable to the impact of disasters. So to help out each other, to provide for HADR assistance, that is humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, there is a disaster management center that is available. They've also established a SAARC currency swap framework. India's RBI has led this initiative, and we have set up a currency swap framework to help countries when they face a liquidity crisis. To help the members when they face an economic crisis, financial crisis, like Sri Lanka did. When Sri Lanka was hit by the debt crisis, when the country was on the brink of economic collapse, through the SARC, India provided a currency swap arrangement. Is that clear? In a currency swap framework, the local currency is exchanged with usually US dollars. All right, let me give you a brief idea how currency swap works. Now, let's say Sri Lanka is facing this economic crisis. It is running short of US dollars. Because without US dollars, you can't continue with global trade. You can't continue your imports. So let's say Sri Lanka is in need of 50 or let's say 100 million US dollars. Now, India, which has enough forex reserves, right, we would have contributed to the SARC currency swap framework, and India's RBI will make this facility available, where we will provide 100 million USD to Sri Lanka. We will provide this in US dollars. 100 million worth of US dollars currency would be given to Sri Lanka. In return, Sri Lanka will deposit the Sri Lankan rupees with our RBI. The currency is swapped, currency is exchanged. Even we have a similar currency exchange agreement with Japan. All right, when countries face a liquidity crunch, it helps to borrow from other countries and swap your currency with them. Is that clear? Now, let's say Sri Lanka has taken $100 million in US currency. In return, it will deposit $100 million worth of Sri Lankan rupees with our RBI. So RBI will hold on to the Sri Lankan rupees. Later, Sri Lanka will have to repay. It will have to pay with a little bit of interest as well to get the Sri Lankan rupees released back into the hands of Sri Lanka. So it's a swap arrangement. So Sri Lanka will take US dollars from the currency framework, use it for the time being to continue its imports and rebuild its economy, to restructure its economy. After a certain time, they would have agreed for a time period, maybe 2 years or 3 years. After that time period, they have to repay. They have to pay the money back to India. They have to give the dollars back to RBI with a certain amount of interest. And in return, RBI will give back the Sri Lankan currency which was held by the RBI. That is generally how a currency swap works. All right. So there is a currency swap framework to help out the small South Asian countries when they face a liquidity crunch. Next, there is a South Asian University which functions from New Delhi. SARC has set up a university to promote education, right? To provide educational opportunities for the South Asian students. Even though the university is functioning from New Delhi, it has a very bad review. It lacks the right infrastructure. It doesn't have good teachers available, right? It hasn't been able to invest much in research. So there's a lot of negativity attached to South Asian University, but it is a functioning university from New Delhi. All right. So these are some of the initiatives that SARC has managed to achieve. All right. This is seen as an achievement of the SARC. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, Prime Minister Modi addressed all the SARC countries together, and we even gave assistance to the SARC countries during the pandemic. All right. India took the lead to help out all the small South Asian countries when the pandemic started. Some of you might remember, Prime Minister Modi held a virtual meeting with all the SARC leaders, and India promised disaster management support. We supplied medicines. We supplied all essentials like oxygen cylinders, sanitizers, PPE kits, testing kits. All of this was supplied by India free of cost to all the SARC countries. Later, we supplied the vaccines as well under Vaccine Maitri. right? Under the Vaccine Maitri initiative, which was India's vaccine diplomacy, we supplied free vaccine to several countries, including our South Asian neighbors. So all of this can be seen as achievements of the SARC grouping. But still, the group is seen as a failure because these initiatives are not enough to achieve economic and regional integration. Because as I told you, to achieve true economic and regional integration, you need connectivity. You need to throw open your borders, relax the visa immigration norms, allow the free movement of people, provide for free movement of goods, services, and investments, create the connectivity projects needed. But this is largely missing in South Asia because South Asia is a very volatile region. This is the primary reason why the grouping has largely failed. Now, do you ever think of going on a vacation to Bangladesh or Pakistan? Right? I'm sure no one does. Correct? Maybe you'll think of Sri Lanka, but again, now given the circumstances, you may not think of Sri Lanka as well. Right? Definitely Maldives. Maldives is a most preferred destination for Indians. Nepal to an extent, Bhutan to an extent, but right, you don't think of our neighboring countries as a tourist destination. Right? It's not just because of the problems present in those countries. It's also because of the strict visa norms. Indians cannot get visas of our own neighboring countries. Similarly, our neighbors can't get our own visa. That is the Indian visa, a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi, right? Even if they want to come to India for some purpose, to study, to work, or as a tourist, it's not easy for them to get a visa because we have very strict visa immigration norms given the security situation in South Asia. Right? The region is very volatile. There are disputes, there are riots, there is terrorism, wars and conflicts, constant tensions between the members, right? Lack of development, backwardness. All these reasons have compromised SARC as a grouping. Is that clear? The primary reason for the failure is the rivalry between India and Pakistan, the constant tensions, and especially Pakistan's obstructionist role in creating problems for India. Pakistan has deliberately blocked Indian initiatives at SARC. All right, there are many examples for that. Whenever India proposes an initiative that will help the SARC countries, Pakistan will go out of its way to block the initiative. It will deliberately obstruct the Indian initiatives. Pakistan gets pleasure by doing this. It doesn't want India to become the regional leader. It doesn't want to allow India to establish its dominance in South Asia. Right? This is a direct result of the constant tensions between India and Pakistan, the geopolitical tensions, the border related tensions. Upon that, Pakistan has been sponsoring terrorism against India, which has destabilized the whole South Asia. Pakistan has used the soil of other countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh to target India. Pakistan has not only bred terrorism within its own country and inside India, it has bred radicalism and terrorism in other countries as well, like Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism has increased tensions in the region. Every terror attack against India, right, which comes from Pakistan, increases the tensions and the divisions, thus derailing the very effectiveness of this grouping. Is that clear? Now take, for example, the SARC satellite that Prime Minister Modi had proposed after coming to power in 2014. Right? Prime Minister Modi, as part of the Neighborhood First policy of India, PM Modi had launched the Neighborhood First policy, saying that we will prioritize our ties with neighboring countries, which meant we should focus more on SARC. So in line with this promise, Prime Minister Modi announced that India's ISRO will be launching a satellite that will help all the South Asian countries. It will provide for communication, broadcasting, and other services, remote sensing services as well, to help all the small South Asian countries. So this was an initiative of India to help our neighbors by launching a satellite. But what did Pakistan do? it tried to block the project. By raising unnecessary security reasons, it not only quit, but it tried to derail the satellite project itself. So India got frustrated. What did India do? India excluded Pakistan. We removed Pakistan out of the equation and renamed SARC satellite as the South Asia satellite. This is just one example of the kind of tensions that exist between India and Pakistan, especially at the SARC grouping. We proposed a satellite initiative called SARC satellite. Pakistan kept blocking it. So India removed Pakistan from the initiative. We went ahead and launched the satellite and we renamed it as South Asian satellite. Today, the satellite is helping many other South Asian countries. Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan. They're all drawing services from South Asian satellite launched by India's ISRO. But I want you to focus on the role of Pakistan, how it obstructs India's initiatives repeatedly. If you guys remember what we discussed last week, I had mentioned that India proposed a motor vehicles agreement. We had proposed a motor vehicles agreement at SARC to promote the free movement of vehicles so that it can improve trade and tourism. But as expected, Pakistan blocked the initiative. It tried obstructing the motor vehicles agreement proposed by India. That is why India got frustrated. We excluded Pakistan and proposed a sub-regional motor vehicles agreement, which we studied last week. That is the BBIN. That is how India came up with the idea of BBIN corridor, right? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal corridor. We proposed this sub-regional initiative because at SARC, we weren't seeing any success as Pakistan kept blocking our efforts. So India excluded Pakistan and ignored SARC and proposed a sub-regional initiative, that is BBIN initiative. Is that clear? So upon this, the border disputes, the terror attacks, they have been a major disruptor which derails India-Pak relations and affects the functioning of SARC, especially after Uri attacks in 2016. Because see, if you look at all the Indian prime ministers, initially they've all given a chance to Pakistan. They've all reached out to Pakistan with a hand of friendship when they came to power. Be it Prime Minister Nehru, even Indira Gandhi, right? Even Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, and even Prime Minister Modi. Initially, Indian prime ministers have reached out to Pakistan with a hand of friendship, hoping to build a better relationship, hoping to resolve the tensions and issues. But every time Pakistan keeps repeating the same pattern. Once the relations improve slightly between the government of India and government of Pakistan, we will witness a major attack, which is usually sponsored by the Pakistani ISI and the Pakistani army. You should understand the distinction between the Pakistani government, the civilian government, which is elected government, and the deep state, the hidden part of the Pakistani government, which is its army and the ISI. The army and the ISI, they do anything that's possible to push India-Pakistan away, to keep India-Pakistan away. And the best way to do that is to sponsor terror attacks against India. Right? We'll understand more about this in the next chapter. But for now, please note that the army and the ISI of Pakistan, they don't promote good relations. They try to derail any friendly ties between the two governments. So there have been a series of repeated attacks against India. Right? Every time a new Indian government and a new Indian leader reaches out to Pakistan, right? There is a series of attacks that happen that derails our ties with Pakistan. So even Prime Minister Modi, after coming to power in 2014, had reached out to Pakistan. In fact, Nawaz Sharif and Prime Minister Modi had started becoming quite close to each other. They had met multiple times. They were even considering holding a joint summit. Right? PM Modi visited Pakistan as well. Nawaz Sharif had come to his swearing-in ceremony, right, when Neighborhood First policy was launched in 2014. So good relations had started developing, but it was disrupted by a major terror attack, the Uri attack in 2016. Right? This attack led to India's retaliation. India retaliated by carrying out surgical strikes, where Indian special forces carried out a covert operation inside Pakistan occupied Kashmir. They targeted multiple terror camps. So these events disrupted the relations. And following this, India adopted a SAARC minus Pakistan approach. We sidelined Pakistan from the region. India sidelined SAARC itself because India was frustrated. India had reached its limit that SAARC has no future as long as Pakistan is part of it. Of course, Pakistan will be a member of SAARC. So India realized that SAARC will go nowhere because Pakistan will keep obstructing our initiatives. It will keep sponsoring terrorism. It will keep derailing India's vision. So India decided after Uri attacks to sideline the SAARC grouping itself in order to isolate Pakistan and put diplomatic pressure on Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism. India sidelined the SAARC grouping under the SAARC minus Pakistan approach. This was India's coercive diplomacy, forceful diplomacy against Pakistan to isolate the country in regional geopolitics. Is that clear? After Uri attacks, the Modi government retaliated with a display of hard power by using the military option to carry out surgical strikes. Along with the surgical strikes, India adopted coercive diplomacy, forceful diplomacy to isolate Pakistan and target Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism. So from here onwards, India sidelined the SAARC grouping itself. And this was a deliberate attempt of India to isolate Pakistan. And as a result, we neglected SAARC for many years. We deliberately kept SAARC aside as the grouping was not achieving anything concrete. Is that clear? Instead, India promoted another grouping. In the place of SAARC, we revived and promoted another organization, another regional organization, which is none other than BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC became prominent only after 2016. BIMSTEC is actually an old organization. It had no relevance, right? Many people weren't even aware that such a grouping existed. Let's say if you ask UPSC aspirants from 2010, 2012, they wouldn't have read much about BIMSTEC. Only those who are in the domain, right, like us teachers or professors, strategic experts, diplomats, they would be aware of BIMSTEC, right? A common man would have never heard of the BIMSTEC because the grouping was outdated. It was irrelevant. India revived this grouping in 2016. India brought back this organization from the dead. We promoted this to become the major organization of the region because we were sidelining SAARC and Pakistan. After Uri attacks, India started following the SAARC minus Pakistan approach, right? Which meant we would put diplomatic pressure on Pakistan, corner Pakistan geopolitically, and isolate Pakistan in the region. For this, India had to sideline SAARC. SAARC would serve no purpose for India. You should also understand that immediately after Uri attacks, the SAARC summit was about to happen. And guess who was supposed to host? Pakistan was the host. Within few days after SAARC attack, after the Uri attacks, within few days, Islamabad summit was about to happen for the SAARC grouping. Right? India boycotted the SAARC summit. As part of the coercive diplomacy and SAARC minus Pakistan approach, we boycotted the SAARC summit in Islamabad, and the surgical strikes had been carried out, and all the other SAARC members, they supported India. All SAARC members, they criticized Pakistan for the Uri attacks. From Afghanistan to Sri Lanka, Maldives to Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, they all criticized Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism They sympathized with India for the Uri attacks and they stood with India, and all of them boycotted the SAARC summit. Not just India, all the SAARC members, the other 7 countries, together, they took a collective position and they all boycotted the Islamabad summit of SAARC. All right? That is why in the last 9 years, there has been no SAARC summit. The last summit was in 2014. The last SAARC summit was in 2014 in Kathmandu. Imagine, it's been almost 9 years. We're approaching a decade. The grouping has not even had a summit. That shows the falling significance of this organization. The Islamabad summit in 2016 got cancelled because all the countries boycotted the summit by blaming Pakistan for the Uri attacks. This was a success for India's coercive diplomacy against Pakistan, and India used the opportunity to sideline Pakistan and the SAARC. And since then, we largely ignored the grouping. We haven't paid much attention. Instead, we revived and promoted another old grouping called BIMSTEC, which we are going to study right now. Is that clear? So the only time we have given attention to SAARC again is when the COVID-19 pandemic happened and when Sri Lanka faced the economic crisis. Other than that, in the last 7 years, India has not engaged closely with SAARC grouping. Is that clear? When the pandemic started, we held a virtual summit. When COVID-19 broke out, India held a virtual summit. Prime Minister Modi met virtually with almost all the SAARC leaders and promised assistance from India, support from India. We delivered the support as well. Supplied medicines, essential items, and even vaccines later were supplied by India. And when Sri Lanka faced the economic crisis last year, we provided a currency swap arrangement under the SAARC framework. Other than that, SAARC has not been very active because after Uri attacks, India has sidelined it. All the countries boycotted the Islamabad summit, and since then, SAARC has become a neglected organization. That's why many experts believe that SAARC is a failure. It has not achieved its objectives. And the primary fault lies with Pakistan and its role. Apart from that, there are other reasons as well. It is the general divisions in South Asia, right? It's not just between India, Pakistan. There have been tensions between India, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka as well, India, Maldives as well. Correct? The region is generally backward. There is a lot of poverty, hunger, lack of education and quality healthcare, right? The poor economic status of many of these countries also plays a role. Is that clear? So you can expect a mains question here. UPSC might ask you to evaluate the relevance of SAARC in today's world. Or UPSC might ask you to critically examine why India has sidelined SAARC after the Uri attacks. Or why India revived BIMSTEC and neglected SAARC from 2016. So such analytical questions can come. You have to list out the reasons for the failure of SAARC. One, of course, is the constant tensions and rivalry between India and Pakistan, the two major members. Second is Pakistan's obstructionist role, where it keeps blocking India's initiatives. Third is Pakistan's role in sponsoring terrorism against India and breeding radicalism across the region. And then the general backwardness of South Asia, the tensions between the various members, the disputes, the lack of economic growth and opportunities in the region, right? The high levels of poverty, high levels of hunger, the socio-economic backwardness also plays a role in derailing SAARC as a grouping. So present all these points, maybe 6 or 7 points, and explain why SAARC has lost its relevance. Many experts believe that SAARC has lost its significance. It has been a failed organization. It still exists. The grouping is still present. Many of the institutions, initiatives are still functioning, but it's not a major regional organization. Is that clear? On this note, I complete my discussion on SAARC. Any idea where SAARC is headquartered? Can someone tell me in the comments? Does anyone know where the headquarters of SAARC, the secretariat, is located? Dhaka? No. Bhutan? It's in Kathmandu. Very good. Vivek, Narendra, and few students have given the right answer. It's headquartered in Kathmandu, Nepal. All right. So I've given you all the important facts and the analysis as well. Now, let us study BIMSTEC. Let's look at the next grouping, that is BIMSTEC. What is BIMSTEC? Where does it focus upon? Who are the members? What is its relevance? All these points have to be understood. BIMSTEC mainly focuses on the Bay of Bengal region. Right? Few countries around Bay of Bengal came together to form this group. Initially, the group was known as BISTEC. This was the initial name when it was established in the year 1997 through the Bangkok Declaration. Write down this point, very important. It was established in the year 1997 with the signing of the Bangkok Declaration between the member countries. BISTEC was an acronym that stood for the member countries. B for Bangladesh, I for India, S for Sri Lanka, and T for Thailand. That's why it was called BISTEC. Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Economic Cooperation. This was the initial name of the group. All right. BISTEC was the name of the organization. It was basically an acronym for the member countries. B for Bangladesh, I for India, S for Sri Lanka, T for Thailand. These countries formed an economic organization focused on Bay of Bengal region. Now, what was unique about this grouping was that for the first time, it was bringing few South Asian countries with Southeast Asian countries. For the first time, a grouping was being formed that brought South Asian countries together with few Southeast Asian countries. Thailand was the Southeast Asian member, whereas India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka were South Asian members. But all of them are the littorals. They are the littoral states of Bay of Bengal. That is what bound them together. Bay of Bengal is the common factor between them. Is that clear? So to focus on Bay of Bengal region and promote economic cooperation between these littoral countries, the BISTEC grouping was formed in the year 1997. All right. Littorals are also referred to as the rim countries. You would have studied this in geography. When you have a sea or an ocean, the countries that face the sea or the ocean, that share a coastline, those countries are called the littorals or littoral states or the rim countries. Now you take Indian Ocean for example. Australia is a littoral of Indian Ocean. India is a littoral of Indian Ocean. South Africa is a littoral of Indian Ocean. Iran, Singapore, Indonesia, they're all littorals of Indian Ocean because they're all opening towards the Indian Ocean and they become the rim countries or the littoral states. So the littorals of Bay of Bengal came together from South Asia and Southeast Asia to form this economic grouping. Later, Myanmar joined the group and it became BIMSTEC. Myanmar was added and it became BIMSTEC or BIMST for economic cooperation. The BIMST here again was an acronym for the member countries. It was again Bangladesh, India, M for Myanmar, S for Sri Lanka, T for Thailand. So these countries were forming an economic cooperation grouping that became the new name of the organization. But still, it was not a prominent and a very relevant organization. Is that clear? Later, India brought two members, Nepal and Bhutan. That is when the current name was given to the group. It became BIMSTEC, and this time BIMSTEC had a full form. It stands for Bay of Bengal Initiative. Bay of Bengal Initiative for multi-sectoral, technical, and economic cooperation. Today, this is the name of BIMSTEC. Since Nepal and Bhutan also joined as members, the previous name was not valid because the previous name stood only for the member countries: Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, economic cooperation. So the name had become irrelevant when Nepal, Bhutan joined, right? So now the name had to be changed. That is when the new name was given, right? It's called the BIMSTEC, which stands for Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation. Is that clear? So these are the member countries. So Nepal and Bhutan, right, even though they are not directly part of Bay of Bengal, they are dependent on Bay of Bengal. We've already studied that. These are landlocked Himalayan states, but they depend on Bay of Bengal. India, Bangladesh provide sea access to these landlocked countries. That's what we studied last week. Since they are also dependent on Bay of Bengal, India pushed their membership at BIMSTEC and got them included. Is that clear? So from South Asia, you have India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. 5 South Asian countries. And from Southeast Asia, 2 countries, Thailand and Myanmar. So in total, these are the 7 members of BIMSTEC representing South Asia and Southeast Asia. And as the name itself tells you, the group focuses on technical and economic cooperation. They focus on some technical areas where they share technical assistance and expertise. They focus on improving economic relations, and it follows a sectoral format. They identify different sectors for cooperation, and in those sectors identified, the countries will work together. That's why it's called multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation. Is that clear? So this group was largely irrelevant until 2016 because the countries had no focus on the group. Even though they had set up the organization, they weren't paying enough attention to the organization, especially Myanmar and Thailand, right? They weren't too interested. They didn't see much benefit from this group. At one point, even India started neglecting the organization, right? There were problems in Myanmar, problems in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So all of this derailed BIMSTEC as a grouping. And from early 2000 to 2016, the group was actually insignificant. It had become an irrelevant, forgotten organization. But then, once India adopted SAARC minus Pakistan approach in 2016 after the Uri attacks, then we parallelly revived this group called BIMSTEC. That is where we saw a revival of this organization. See, what happened was, we not only boycotted the SAARC summit at Islamabad, but that year's BRICS summit was being hosted by India. India was hosting the 2016 BRICS summit at Goa, and the country which is hosting the BRICS summit can invite some regional groups and countries as guest countries. Usually the practice is that India would have invited SAARC. Since we are part of South Asia, SAARC is the closest organization to us. Ideally, we would have invited SAARC to participate at BRICS summit. But what did India do after Uri attacks? We cancelled the invitation. We didn't invite SAARC countries to the BRICS summit. Instead, the BIMSTEC group was invited by India. As the host of the BRICS summit, we did not invite SAARC as we were sidelining the group. We were isolating Pakistan. And instead, this old grouping was revived and brought back, and we invited the BIMSTEC countries to participate. So since then, that is in the last 7 years, from 2016 to 2023, BIMSTEC has seen a major revival and it has become one of the most important regional organizations. Is that clear? There are several big initiatives that have been planned and taken up under BIMSTEC. All right, so let me take you through that, and that will end my discussion on BIMSTEC. Let's see what changes, what achievements have happened in the last few years. The BIMSTEC countries have focused on improving their economic relations. They are focused on improving cultural ties. They have focused on areas like disaster management, and they have also added a military dimension by introducing a military exercise. So it has become a broad-based organization. They are focused in various areas like clean energy, energy security, right? Sustainable development, climate action, disaster management. In fact, BIMSTEC countries even held a disaster management exercise focusing on HADR operations. Since all the Bay of Bengal littorals are affected by disasters, especially cyclones and other natural disasters, the BIMSTEC countries organized a HADR training exercise. Right, under India's leadership, we worked with the BIMSTEC members in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. They launched a military exercise, again under India's leadership. A strategic dimension was added. Subjects like terrorism, organized crime were also added to the mandate of BIMSTEC. That is how BIMSTEC grew in its profile. It was not just a grouping focused on technical assistance and economic cooperation. It started branching out into key areas like cultural ties, connectivity, counter-terrorism. Military exercise was held. A disaster management exercise was started focused on HADR operations. Right? That is how BIMSTEC quickly became a prominent organization. So last year at Colombo, a major summit of BIMSTEC was held. The Colombo Summit of BIMSTEC. Now, this is very, very important because there were many big developments at this summit. All right, I'll list out the major developments at this summit, and that will help you understand why the organization has become so important. So, during the Colombo Summit, the biggest step was that the BIMSTEC countries have adopted a charter for the organization. Please note down this point. It's very, very important. A BIMSTEC charter. Charter is like a constitution. Now, UN, the United Nations, has the UN Charter. Countries have their own constitutions that defines how the organization will function, right? What rights the member countries have, what is the interaction between the member countries. All those aspects are defined in the charter. Charter is a document, a legal document acting like the constitution of that particular organization. So similar to the UN Charter, a BIMSTEC Charter was adopted during the Colombo Summit last year. Is that clear? So this makes BIMSTEC a more formal organization. It has given a formal structure to the organization. It has defined the transactions, the interaction between the member countries. Got it? So BIMSTEC Charter being adopted was the biggest step during the Colombo Summit. Next, the countries have reorganized the sectors for cooperation. Since it's a sector-based grouping, right? Previously, there were some 9 or 10 different sectors in which they were working. They brought more efficiency into the group by reorganizing the sectors. And today they have identified 7 sectors for cooperation. And each sector is headed by one member country. This was another big step. They reorganized multiple sectors into 7 sectors where they will focus on cooperation. Each sector is headed by one member country. For example, India heads the security energy sector. This is India's responsibility. So security includes counter-terrorism, disaster management, organized crime. These security aspects are covered along with energy security. So India is the leader responsible for this key sector that includes counter-terrorism, disaster management, organized crime, and energy security. Like this, there are 6 more sectors. I want you guys to identify this. Take this as homework. Read about the 7 sectors of BIMSTEC that were notified during Colombo Summit. All right, every sector is headed by one member country. I've told you that India heads the security and energy sector. Please identify the 6 other sectors. Identify the 6 other sectors and identify the lead country. Which country is responsible for these sectors? This is your homework. This is a small assignment for you. All right, please read about this. Next, there was another big development at the Colombo Summit. The BIMSTEC countries have adopted a master plan for connectivity. Please write down this point. They have adopted a master plan for connectivity and they are selecting several projects to bring South Asia closer to Southeast Asia. It includes a mix of road, railway, seaport, and airport projects. So existing projects like IMT highway that we studied, India, Myanmar, Thailand highway, the trilateral highway. The Kaladan project that we studied, right? These projects are already connecting India with Myanmar and even with Thailand. So such existing projects are added to the list. Along with that, they have identified many more projects across South Asia and Southeast Asia, which will be funded by Asian Development Bank. Please write down this point, very, very important. They have launched a master plan for connectivity. In the coming years, they will take up and execute these connectivity projects to link the South Asian and Southeast Asian countries. From Sri Lanka to Thailand, Bangladesh to Myanmar, India to Myanmar, right? All these connectivity projects have been identified and they will be funded by the ADB, the Asian Development Bank. Many of the big existing projects are also included, like Kaladan and IMT highway project. So this in a way fulfills our vision under the Look East, Act East policy. Please understand that India's focus on BIMSTEC is in line with our vision for Southeast and East Asia and the Indo-Pacific. It aligns with our broad vision for Indo-Pacific. It allows us to pay more attention to the eastern region because see, Bay of Bengal is part of Indian Ocean, right? It's critical part of the Indo-Pacific. So by focusing on BIMSTEC and Bay of Bengal region, we are improving our influence, strengthening our influence across the Indo-Pacific. So it aligns with our Look East, Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific vision of our foreign policy. So the master plan for connectivity is a major initiative that they have announced. Next, they have proposed a free trade agreement and negotiations have apparently started. This was proposed by Prime Minister Modi. PM Modi raised the idea of a free trade agreement amongst BIMSTEC countries and they've agreed for starting the negotiations on a possible FTA. If everything goes well, in a few years, there might be a free trade agreement for the BIMSTEC member countries. Is that clear? So that is why the Colombo summit is very, very important. It's a recent development. There were many big initiatives. It highlights how BIMSTEC has become a dominant group under India's leadership, whereas SARC has largely been neglected and sidelined. So please understand this analysis. After Uri attacks, we boycotted SARC summit, isolated Pakistan, and sidelined SARC as an organization. And parallelly, in the last 7 years, we have rebuilt and revived the BIMSTEC, and today it has become a prominent organization of the region. Is that clear? So there can be a question, you can expect a question where UPSC might ask you to compare SARC and BIMSTEC. All right. Now you know all the facts, the basic analysis, why India took this approach. All those points have been covered. But you guys tell me, can SARC ever be a replacement? Or rather, can BIMSTEC ever be a replacement of SARC as far as India is concerned? Answer this with yes or no. Can BIMSTEC replace SARC? Yes or no? Majority are saying no. Very few are saying yes. Okay, let me tell you my opinion and also what most of the experts think. See, in geopolitics, what did we learn? Geography is very important. Geography plays a critical role in international relations. So based on this logic, BIMSTEC is a grouping focused on Bay of Bengal, right? But where is India located? In which region? Are we a Southeast Asian country, right? No. Answer is no. Yes, we are a littoral of Bay of Bengal, but only part of India opens to Bay of Bengal. That is the east coast of India. Rest of India has nothing to do with Bay of Bengal, right? Geographically speaking. So if you ask, where is India located geographically? We are located in South Asia, and that is a reality. Sometimes, whether you like it or not, right, you have to live with the geography that you are blessed with. You can't change your neighbors. Now, just because we are not happy with Pakistan, we have problems with Pakistan, we can't ignore our neighbor or we can't ignore the grouping of South Asia, that is SARC. Is that clear? It's good to revive BIMSTEC. That's great. Focusing more on Bay of Bengal is a great idea. It's a great initiative, right? It aligns with our Look East Act East policy. It will improve our ties with Southeast Asian countries. It will allow us to leverage Bay of Bengal to improve economic relations. It's a great idea, but it cannot be a replacement for SARC. SARC serves a different purpose. BIMSTEC cannot be seen as a replacement of SARC. That is the most supported opinion, right? Because we are located in South Asia. South Asia needs a strong, well-functioning regional organization to deal with regional issues, to support each other, to help each other and thrive together. You need a regional organization. Now, why do you think European countries are very stable nations? Why do you think European countries have succeeded? One reason is the European Union. We will study this later at the end of the syllabus. We will study European Union. There I will explain how the EU played a transformative role in changing the very fate and future of European countries. If you think about Europe in 1900s, it was a continent destroyed by war, where countries were fighting against each other, in conflict with each other. Within few decades, they became developed nations, friendly countries. They removed border controls. They erased visa immigration norms, right? Provided for free movement of people, goods and services and investments. It's very hard to imagine, right? If you were to think, let's say during the World War era, right? If you tell anyone in that period that this is likely to happen, no one would have believed that. So if such a war-ravaged continent could come together and become a developed, thriving region, one of the answers is regional cooperation. Regional cooperation in Europe is what transformed the region. and European Union gets the credit. That's why EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. A few years back, EU was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize because it transformed the continent, which was devastated by wars and conflicts a century ago. Similarly, ASEAN grouping has transformed Southeast Asia. See, if you look at Southeast Asian countries individually, they're all very small nations. If you just look at Singapore, just look at Indonesia or Thailand, right, or Vietnam, they're all very small countries and small economies. But when you bring them together as a collective group, they become a formidable economic force and a geopolitical force. That is lacking in South Asia. Right? In South Asia, we have not resolved most of the disputes. We don't have free movement. Right? There is a lack in economic growth, in opportunities being created. That's also because we are not good friends with each other. So having a strong regional grouping will help in that regard. Today, you might ignore Pakistan. You might neglect SARC. You can't keep doing that forever because we live in South Asia. We reside in South Asia. See, we are not criticizing BIMSTEC. The revival of BIMSTEC is a great idea. It's a great initiative as it serves the purpose of India's national interests. It brings us closer to our Southeast Asian neighbors. It drives our Act East policy. It drives our Indo-Pacific approach and allows us to dominate the Bay of Bengal. But it would be a wrong approach to see BIMSTEC as a replacement of SARC. Bay of Bengal is here, South Asia is here, right? So many experts have the same opinion that we can't simply assume that BIMSTEC can replace SARC. It can't, right? You can't change the geography that you're presented with. So what is the future? In the future, we have to find a way to revive SARC. If not SARC, replace it with another organization. But South Asia needs a very good regional organization, right? And you can't do it without Pakistan. Pakistan is a part of the region. It's a neighbor of India. We have to work with that country. Of course, it requires a change in behavior from Pakistan as well, right? The responsibility is not on India. India has tried its best. So unless and until you have a strong, well-functioning regional organization in South Asia, the region will not be able to solve its problems. From border issues to poor economic growth, these issues will not be solved in South Asia unless and until you have a strong regional grouping. That is why SARC will remain relevant in some way or the other. May not be in the same form, but a regional grouping for South Asia is relevant. All right. So please understand, BIMSTEC cannot replace SARC as a grouping. So this is the discussion I wanted to have regarding regional organizations. We have covered many important topics under this discussion, right? We not only discussed previous questions at the start, we covered SARC and BIMSTEC with a complete understanding of regional geopolitics and dynamics. I hope everything is clear. Now we can take a short break. Let's take a 15 minutes break. We'll come back and we will be starting with the next module. We will focus on India's relations with Pakistan and as well as our relations with Afghanistan. We have to take up both together one by one because both are connected. Our ties with Pakistan is linked to our ties with Afghanistan. Is that clear? So let's begin with India-Pakistan relations. And as we wind up this chapter, we will study India-Afghan relations as well, along with the current situation in Afghanistan. So today and tomorrow, we will focus on this region and we'll try to wrap up this important topic. So take a 15 minutes break. I think it's almost 6:30. Let's come back at 6:45. All right, and we will continue the discussion. So I'll see you back at sharp 6:45. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the session. First, let me take up some of the doubts and questions, and then we'll start with the next chapter, that is India, Pakistan, and India and Afghanistan. First, Ayush is asking why Myanmar is not a member of SARC. Mehru has a similar question, why Myanmar and China are not included in SARC. That's because Myanmar and China are not part of South Asia region. I had mentioned this in the last week itself, in the last classes. Myanmar is a Southeast Asian country. China is a East Asian power, right? So they're not part of South Asia. However, as I mentioned, Myanmar and China are included in SARC as observer states, but not as members. Because SARC is specific to South Asian countries. Pravalika is asking, what is coercive diplomacy? How it helped India against Pakistan? Coercive diplomacy is a type of forceful diplomacy where you point out the mistakes being committed by a country. You put diplomatic pressure on the country. You isolate them geopolitically. For example, at the United Nations, India keeps bringing up the issue of terrorism, and we point out how Pakistan has become a state sponsorer of terrorism, right? Through the UN, we exert diplomatic pressure on Pakistan. We try to isolate Pakistan. That is coercive diplomacy. Is that clear? We have used platforms like FATF, Financial Action Task Force, to blame Pakistan for financing terrorism. That is an example of coercive diplomacy. Similarly, after Uri attacks, we boycotted the SARC summit and ensured all other SARC members supported India, and together they boycotted the SARC summit in Islamabad. That is an example of coercive diplomacy, where you're targeting a country through diplomatic methods, without using force, without using any military methods. Just through diplomatic means, you're targeting a country and isolating them in geopolitics. So that is an example of coercive diplomacy. Kambampati is asking, what was the reason SARC was established in 1985? The reason why SARC was established was to promote regional cooperation between the South Asian countries, to promote economic ties, to bring the countries closer, to drive the development of South Asia region. That is why SARC was set up in 1985. Aniket is asking, during COVID-19, did India provide assistance to Pakistan? Not directly, but through the SARC framework, India did give assistance to all the SARC members. All SARC countries contributed some funds. We provided the medical supplies and essential supplies and even vaccines, which was distributed through SARC to all the member countries. So that way we indirectly helped all SARC members, including Pakistan. Lekani is asking, what is Asian Development Bank? Asian Development Bank, or ADB, it's a financial institution, just like you have World Bank. Similarly, there is Asian Development Bank, focused mainly on the Asian region. But it has members from other parts of the world as well. It provides funding, provides loans, and development assistance to various countries. It's based out of Philippines in Manila, and Japan, China, and India. They are the most powerful countries at Asian Development Bank. They have the highest voting share. The top three voting share is with China, followed by Japan, and then India. Vivek is asking, can we keep Pakistan non-functional in SARC? No, you can't do that. As Pakistan is a full-time member, India will not have the rights or powers to sideline Pakistan within the grouping. We can't do that. That's why we have ignored SARC itself. The entire group can be ignored by India. We can sideline the grouping. But within SARC, we can't just make Pakistan non-functional. That cannot happen. Mansi is asking, why do we have observers? I already answered that question. We invite like-minded countries and organizations to certain organizations. They come as guest participants. They participate in the summits. They take part in the discussions. They contribute to the discussions, but they can't initiate any debate. They can't start a resolution. They can't vote. So those powers are not given to observer states, but since they have a common vision and some like-minded objectives, some of the countries are invited as guest countries or as observer states. Vaishna is asking, will there be a problem in currency swap if two countries have a large trade deficit? Not really. Currency swap is only to help a country facing a financial crisis. Trade deficit has to do with the current account trade balance, which is the difference between their imports and exports, right? The two are a little unrelated. Even if there is a large trade deficit, currency swap arrangement can still be provided. Like India, Sri Lanka. Between India, Sri Lanka, there is a big trade deficit. And the deficit is in favor of India and against Sri Lanka. And still we gave a currency swap arrangement to help Sri Lanka during the latest economic crisis. All right. So guys, these were some of the questions. Now let's begin with India and Pakistan by looking at the map of Pakistan. I will be pointing out some important locations which will help you realize why Pakistan is crucial for India. We are doing this in every chapter. We will look at the map of the country, right? Because in geopolitics, geography influences politics. The physical geography of a place, the human geography of a place has a direct role to play in international relations. So it's always good to begin a country by looking at the geography of that country, by understanding the basics about the geography of a country. If you look at Pakistan, it is made up of these provinces. You can see the Punjab province. As we discussed under India Bangladesh, we spoke about the liberation of Bangladesh war. I told you that the Punjab region has been the most dominant region in Pakistan's politics, right from Pakistan's creation from 1947, right? The Punjab region has been the most dominant and influential region because of the Punjabi elite. The Punjabi Muslims from this region, they have been the dominant class. And even today, in every aspect of Pakistan, it's the Punjabi elite who dominate. You look at any major political party, you look at the top leaders of Pakistan, all former presidents, prime ministers. You look at the Pakistani army, the army chiefs, the top generals. Look at the ISI and the top officials of the ISI. They all come from the Punjab region, right? Punjabi is an ethnicity here. It's an ethnic linguistic identity, and it's the people of this region who have dominated Pakistan. And even today, right across the country, it's the Punjabi elite who dominate. Then you have Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the other provinces of Pakistan. The Sindh province was created by partitioning the Gujarat region from India, right? So we do have a close historical cultural link with the Sindh region. The Sindhi community forms a common connection here. And this is where Karachi is located, the commercial hub of Pakistan. Karachi is also home to a major naval base and a port. Pakistani Navy has a major naval base here. This was the naval base that was set on fire by the Indian Navy during the 1971 war. Right? I had mentioned this under India Bangladesh. When India was fighting the war to liberate Bangladesh, the Indian Navy delivered a significant damage to Pakistani Navy by destroying the Karachi harbor. That is the day, the 4th of December, which is marked even today as the Navy Day by Indian Navy. Karachi is also a hub of criminal organizations. There are several organized criminal outfits, including drug cartels and arms trafficking organizations that operate out of Karachi. It's a hub of underworld organizations. Is that clear? Many wanted criminals are present in Karachi. They are supported, protected at Karachi by Pakistan's ISI. Even in Punjab region, radicalism is very high. This was created by partitioning the then Punjab province, right? This part of Punjab became a state in India, the current state of Punjab in India. The other side of Punjab, which has been the dominant region, it has become a hub of radicalism and extremism as well. Several terror groups, they have a strong presence. They conduct rallies. They get a lot of recruitment from Punjab region. Can you see this place called Bahawalpur? Bahawalpur is seen as the headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed. Jaish-e-Mohammed and even Lashkar-e-Toiba, they have a strong presence at Bahawalpur. All right. So this is where major cities like Lahore, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, they're all present in this region. Then you have the Baloch region, Balochistan, one of the most problematic provinces for Pakistan. Because during independence, the Baloch people, they wanted to remain independent. They didn't want to join Pakistan. All right. The Baloch people are found in neighboring Iran as well, in parts of Iran as well. But Pakistan forcefully annexed and forced the merger of the Baloch region. And today it's the largest and the most resourceful region in Pakistan. Balochistan is blessed with resources. At the same time, it's hit by a major conflict because the Baloch community declared a war against Pakistan. They've opposed the forceful merger. Pakistani army has committed brutal atrocities here against the Baloch people, right? So there is a insurgent war going on in Balochistan. There are several Baloch insurgent groups and militant organizations that wage a war against the Pakistani state, especially against the Pakistani army and the ISI. So the army and the ISI have committed brutal atrocities here in the name of counter-terrorism, right? They've committed tortures, kidnappings, killings. Essentially, there have been large-scale human rights violations in Balochistan. India does have contacts and links with Baloch groups, and Pakistan often accuses India of instigating and sponsoring the Baloch groups. But it has never presented any evidence. India denies sponsoring the Baloch rebel groups. But of course, any major power would have contacts with such major outfits, that too in a rival country. Since many decades, Indian intelligence agencies are believed to be close to Baloch rebel outfits, and we do maintain some contact with them, right? Providing political, moral, economic, or even armed support, right? Even though there is no evidence to prove that, India denies this officially, right? It's widely believed that we do have some contacts with Baloch rebel groups. In Balochistan, you can see a major port, the Gwadar port, which has been developed by China as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Gwadar port in Balochistan. All right? It's a Chinese built port as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, a strategic port facing the Arabian Sea. Gwadar port is just a few kilometers away from the Chabahar port in Iran. Just a few kilometers away in Iran, you have the strategic Chabahar port, which has been developed by India. India has funded and constructed the Chabahar port as a link to Iran and Afghanistan. Via Chabahar port in Iran, we have tried accessing Afghanistan and even Central Asia. All right. So the Chabahar port is also operated by an Indian company. One of the terminals is still operated by an Indian company. Next, please look at this border, the India-Pakistan border. This border is called the Radcliffe Line. We had studied this under India-Bangladesh itself, right? India-Pakistan were partitioned by the Radcliffe Committee set up by the British government. So the partitioning line that divided India and West Pakistan and East Pakistan is called the Radcliffe Line. So even today, the India-Pakistan boundary and India-Bangladesh boundary, right? Both are referred to as the Radcliffe Line. It was drawn by the Radcliffe Commission. Is that clear? So this boundary between India-Pakistan is of two types. We share two types of boundaries with Pakistan. From the Jammu region to Punjab to Rajasthan till Gujarat. This entire stretch of the boundary almost till here. All right, from Jammu, Punjab, Rajasthan till Gujarat, this whole stretch of the boundary between India and Pakistan is called by a name. There's an official name to it. Does anyone know what is it called? What do we call this boundary between India and Pakistan? Pratyaksh has got it right. Many are saying LOC. Please understand, my dear friends, this is not the LOC. Only one student, Pratyaksh, has got it right. This part of the Radcliffe Line is called IB, the international border. This is a settled boundary between India and Pakistan. The settled boundary where we have no disputes. This is an undisputed border from lower parts of Jammu till the end of Gujarat. This entire stretch of the border, this stretch of the Ratcliffe line is called IB or international border. It's a settled permanent boundary. We don't have disputes over this border. Is that clear? But at the tip of IB, where IB meets the Arabian Sea, at this point, we have a small dispute present. This is the Kutch region. In the Kutch region of Gujarat and Sindh, near the Run of Kutch. I hope you know Run of Kutch is a marshy wetland. It's a marshy area, right? Where you have these estuaries and creeks that are present, which connect with the Arabian Sea. It's part of the Indus drainage basin itself. So in the Kutch region between Gujarat state of India and the Sindh province of Pakistan, where the IB ends, there is a small dispute that exists. Does anyone know what is this dispute? What is this place? The name of the place where we have a dispute. Very good. Vivek, Garvit, Hemangini, Ravi, Pratyaksh, Vikash, they've all got the right answer. This is the Sir Creek dispute. We will be studying this later. All right. Next, in this part of Jammu and Kashmir, this is where we have another type of boundary. This is the LOC, the line of control. This is called line of control. It's a de facto border. It's a temporary border. Please remember this. In the disputed Kashmir region. Since Kashmir is disputed between India and Pakistan, this line has become the de facto boundary, the temporary border, till the final boundary is worked out. Till the Kashmir dispute is settled, this is the temporary de facto boundary between India and Pakistan. Remember, we studied this in detail under India-Bangladesh, under the Shimla Agreement. I told you that when India fought the first war with Pakistan, right, we pushed back the Pakistani intruders, retook some of the captured areas, and then called for a ceasefire. We took the Kashmir dispute to the United Nations, hoping for a fair solution, right? So whatever positions India and Pakistan held at the end of the first war in 1947, when the ceasefire was called, that became the ceasefire line. This line was the temporary de facto boundary, which was later renamed in 1972 under the Shimla Agreement. We renamed it as LOC, the line of control. All right. So this is the part of Jammu and Kashmir which is under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. So we call this as POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. So Pakistan has captured these parts of Jammu and Kashmir and the Gilgit-Baltistan region as well. So this entire stretch is not under Indian control since 1947. Is that clear? But still, we have to claim this region, show them in our maps, because that is how you strengthen your claim. If we insist that Pakistan has illegally occupied these areas, and if we claim sovereignty on these areas, even if we don't control them since independence, we have to show them in our map and keep claiming them. That is how we can put pressure on Pakistan. That is why the government insists that all the maps should be the official maps, showing the whole part of J&K as it existed in 1947. Is that clear? So this is the occupied area. Parts of J&K and Gilgit-Baltistan, which Pakistan illegally took over in 1947. Is that clear? So this is POK. Don't refer to this region by any other name, because Pakistan calls it Azad Kashmir. You cannot use that name. That would be incorrect. As Indian citizens, as aspirants to this exam, we have to go by the official wordings of the government of India. We just call this region Jammu and Kashmir. The occupied areas by Pakistan is called as POK. These are the accepted terms. Is that clear? whatever part of J&K is under our control, we just call it Jammu and Kashmir, nothing else. Rest of it, which Pakistan has occupied, we call it POK. These are the only two terminologies you should be using. Pakistan calls it Azad Kashmir. It's unacceptable for us. We don't recognize this term. It's unacceptable to India. Other third parties, like other countries, private companies, global organizations, then United Nations, for example, they refer to this area as Pakistan administered Kashmir and Indian administered Kashmir. Even this is unacceptable to India. Is that clear? Never use these terms. Pakistan calls it Azad Kashmir. India has rejected these claims. We never use these terms. Other countries like US, China, European countries, global organizations, global companies like, let's say, Google, Apple, right? United Nations. All the third parties, they see this as a disputed area. And whatever area is under Pakistan's control, they call it Pakistan administered Kashmir. Even this is not acceptable for us because we want to make it clear to the world that Pakistan is under the illegal occupation of Indian territory. So if you use the word Pakistan administered Kashmir, that will not convey illegal occupation. That is why India insists that we refer to this area as POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir. The third parties refer to the Indian side of J&K as Indian administered Kashmir. Even this is not acceptable to India. That shows the area is disputed, right? They're questioning India's sovereignty and control over the part of J&K which is under our administration. So we don't use this term as well. We just refer to it as Jammu and Kashmir. Currently, it's the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So please be careful about the terminologies. It's very, very important. Next, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is the tribal belt. Over here, in this region near Peshawar, right, in this part of northwest Pakistan, this is the tribal areas of Pakistan. A very dangerous area. You might have heard about a region known as Waziristan, right? North Waziristan, South Waziristan, the Swat Valley, right? These were previously called FATA, federally administered tribal areas. That was the name Pakistan was using before. Pakistan would call it as FATA, federally administered tribal area. It's a tribal hinterland and it's a hub of radicalism, extremism, and terrorism. Now the region is called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. This is where Balkot is located, where India carried out the airstrikes. This is where many terror camps are located of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, even Taliban and Al-Qaeda have bases at Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Even in POK, very close to the LOC, Pakistan has set up many terror facilities to train and launch terrorists into India. Is that clear? In this map, you can see a small boundary that we share with Afghanistan over here. This is the Wakhan corridor. It's a small land corridor in the Hindu Kush region. You have the mighty Hindu Kush ranges in northern Afghanistan. And if we had control over entire J&K, including Gilgit-Baltistan, India would have had a small boundary around 96 kilometers border with Afghanistan. Right? This would have connected us from Gilgit-Baltistan to Wakhan corridor, and we could have directly accessed Afghanistan and even Central Asia. We could have connected with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan via Afghanistan through the Wakhan corridor. But unfortunately, we don't have this access because in reality, we don't share this boundary with Afghanistan because Pakistan has captured these territories and it's under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. Next, this is where you have the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. This is also known by a name. Does anyone know what's the name for Pakistan-Afghanistan border? What is it called? Very good. Karthik, Vaibhav, Pratyaksh have given the right answer. It's called the Durand Line. It was drawn by the Durand Commission following the Anglo-Afghan wars of 1800s. Right, the British, they did try extending their colonial control over Afghanistan as well, and for some time they controlled Afghanistan. Right, so later the British were forced to give up the control. They were forced to retreat, facing a rebellion by the Pashtuns. The Pashtuns are a native ethnic tribal community from Afghanistan. They resisted the British occupation and eventually defeated the British and threw them out. So finally, a boundary had to be drawn between British India and then Afghanistan. For this, the Durand Commission had been set up. So this line today that you have, which marks the international boundary between Pakistan and Afghanistan, is called the Durand Line. Is that clear? So Pashtuns, they are found in southern and eastern Afghanistan primarily. They are the dominant ethnic group. They are a dominant ethnic group in the region, and you can find Pashtuns on the other side as well in Pakistan. The Pashtun community can be found both in Afghanistan and Pakistan along the Durand Line. The Pashtuns don't really respect the validity of this border. They see the whole region as part of the Pashtun community, right, historically. And that is why Pakistan actually faces a challenge here with regard to its own sovereignty and the validity of the border line. Pashtuns on both sides are connected. The Afghan Pashtuns and Pakistani Pashtuns are connected. They move around the region. They work with each other. There are many radical terror groups which rely on the Pashtun community, right? So they don't respect the validity of the Durand Line in this region. Is that clear? Now, this whole stretch of the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, this has become a terror sanctuary, a terror hub. This is Pakistan's primary terror factory. Pakistan has nurtured terrorism from decades. It has bred radicalism and extremism, directly supported terrorism, and across the country there are many terror camps present. Be it in Punjab, near Karachi, in POK, over all these regions, there are terror bases available, support available for terrorist organizations. But the biggest support is here in the tribal belt, from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa to the Baloch border. This whole stretch of the boundary is a complete hub of terrorist activities, right? This is where you find Taliban, the Afghan branch of Taliban, which currently has captured power in Afghanistan, which has formed the government. You also find the Pakistani branch of Taliban, also known as the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. TTP is a faction of Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban. It targets the Pakistani state itself. You might have read in news reports that there is a terrorist group carrying out attacks in Pakistan against Pakistan. Right? Recently, the last 1 year itself, there have been multiple attacks. And all these attacks are blamed on TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. It's the Pakistani branch of Taliban. Just like you have Afghan Taliban, which threw out the Afghan government and formed the current government in Afghanistan. Similarly, there is a Pakistani branch. Is that clear? Then you also have Al-Qaeda having a major presence both in Afghanistan and Pakistan in this border area. And anti-India terror groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, and many others. All these terrorist groups have a strong presence across this boundary line, right? Particularly near Peshawar, in the tribal belt of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and also towards the Baloch region. So this is the extent to which Pakistan has supported terrorism. It has used terrorism as a geopolitical tool, as a weapon against India. So throughout this chapter, we will focus on all these issues. We will focus on the border issues, the Kashmir dispute. We will discuss the problem of terrorism, why Pakistan relies on terrorism, right? All these issues have to be discussed and analyzed in detail. So let's start this discussion by understanding the roots of the conflict. I want you guys to understand What drives this behavior of Pakistan? See, I'm sure all of you agree that Pakistan is our most problematic neighbor. From 1947 till now, it has repeatedly created problems for India. Right? It has gone out of its way to create problems for India. From claiming Kashmir and trying to occupy Kashmir, to sponsoring various terrorist movements. Right? It sponsored insurgency and terrorism in Kashmir. It sponsored the Khalistan movement in Punjab. It gave support to Northeast insurgents. It has constantly tried to widen the communal divide in India and to destabilize India. It has spread terrorism across the country to Indian cities as well. So, what drives this behavior of Pakistan? That is the question. To answer this question, you should understand the psyche, the mentality of the Pakistani elite. You should understand the history, the complicated history that led to the creation of India and Pakistan. You should understand the different path that India and Pakistan took after they were created. This is where the answer lies. If you're asking me why Pakistan keeps targeting India, why it believes in terrorism, why it keeps supporting terrorism to this extent, the answer lies here. So let's understand the psyche of the Pakistani establishment, the Pakistani state. That is the government, the army, and the ISI. Let's understand the complex history which led to the creation of these countries, India and Pakistan. Let's understand the internal structures in Pakistan. Let's understand the start of this rivalry and the different path that the two countries have taken since independence. The moment you understand these points, you will find your answer. Is that clear? As I told you in the very first class, most of the problems in South Asia, they have a colonial origin. Colonial policies, colonial blunders are directly responsible for the current geopolitical problems in South Asia. Be it the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, the Rohingya crisis, the border dispute between India, Nepal, India, China, the Kashmir dispute, the divide between Hindus and Muslims in the region, it's all of colonial origin. It's all largely a colonial creation because of their policy of divide and rule. Remember, we had a discussion on the same topic under India-Bangladesh. We studied the liberation of Bangladesh. We understood how Punjabi elite dominated over the other communities in Pakistan and how they targeted, discriminated, oppressed the Bengalis in East Pakistan. Right? So this points to the divisions, the social divisions that were created and increased and widened by British policies. The British were very shrewd. They were very cunning to retain their strong control over the Indian colony, the prized asset of the British. Right? They divided the Indian society. They broke the harmony that existed in the Indian society. They destroyed the social equations along with destroying the economy. They introduced communalism. Right? Of course, there were communal divisions even before. Right? But it was largely limited to a few pockets here and there. Communal tendencies will be present in any region, right, between any two religions. Historically as well, there have been communal clashes, tensions in different parts of India. But this was never widespread. By and large, in the Indian subcontinent, there was communal harmony, right? Be it under various kingdoms, empires, even the Mughal Empire, right? The various kingdoms and empires. By and large, there has been a history of communal harmony between the major communities, right? Not just between Hindus and Muslims, but also amongst other religions. India has been a land of tolerance, right? Of course, it's not perfect. There will be tensions, clashes, rivalries. But by and large, if you look at our history, this has been a land of tolerance, a land of diversity, where people of different faith, people of different communities have flourished and thrived and lived with each other peacefully and with harmony. This harmony was destroyed, and the existing communal lines were widened and the divisions were increased by British policies. They would go on to support extremist elements as part of their divide and rule policy, especially after 1857. right? Because they saw that during the Sepoy Mutiny, the first war of Indian independence, they realized what will happen if there is a united opposition and a freedom struggle led by the Indians. So from 1860s, 70s, and 80s, in the later half of 19th century, they aggressively implemented their divide and rule policy to increase and widen the social divisions in the country. They divided people on linguistic lines, on caste lines, on ethnic lines, and also on religious lines. They would back and support extremist factions and elements on both the sides to further increase the divisions and cause polarization in the society. So by early 1900s, by the early part of 20th century, the Indian society was communally charged. Within 50 to 60 years, from 1860s to 1920s, hardly 60 years of time. In that time span, the Indian subcontinent had become communally charged, right? They backed several extremist outfits, extremist leaders on both the sides to increase the divisions, to lead to riots, to cause regular rivalries and tensions in different parts of the country. The partition of Bengal, as we studied under India Bangladesh, right, was a communal idea. It was a communal division of the Bengal province. That's why many historians believe that partition of Bengal laid the seed, the idea of partitioning India and Pakistan eventually in 1947. If India Pakistan were created on communal lines in 1947, that idea was created back in 1905 when Bengal was partitioned on religious lines. They would back the Muslim League led by Jinnah and support the extremist demands for a communal division of the subcontinent. Right? Jinnah and Muslim League would demand a separate nation for the Muslims. The Indian National Congress was firmly against it. India's freedom leaders, the leaders of the freedom struggle, they firmly opposed these demands, but the British would encourage these tendencies. Similarly, they would back radical Hindutva outfits and elements as well, such as Hindu Mahasabha, promoting radical strands of religion, trying to push India towards becoming a Hindu authoritarian state. Right? And this is where a fundamental difference came up between India and Pakistan when they finally gained independence in 1947. Before independence, there was already large-scale communal polarization, right? Throughout 1900s, there were large-scale riots happening in different parts of the country. For example, during the Khilafat struggle, right? During elections held in 1940s, right? Muslim League had given a call for direct action day, where extremist factions on both sides, they went on a rampage, killing people of the other community, causing mass riots in Bengal and also in Punjab. Eventually, during partition, right, during independence, there was massive communal violence between various extremist factions of both Muslims, Hindus, and even the Sikhs, right, causing human tragedy in the Indian subcontinent. Even after independence, these communal tendencies would define what India would be and what Pakistan would be. Leaders like Jinnah and leaders of the Muslim League, who went on to form the Pakistani state, they instilled a sense of religion into the state. They fused state and religion to form a theological state. They adopted a rigid strand of misinterpreted Islam and provided for a theocratic state, right, where the government would not respect democratic rights, the army would become stronger and stronger, and obviously religious minorities and all minority groups, they started being targeted. Right from the beginning, in Pakistan, religious minorities, be it Sikhs, Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, and even Muslims, right? Even Muslims who don't subscribe to the rigid strand of Wahhabism, Salafism that Pakistan was adopting, right? Those who wouldn't follow that, even they would be targeted. Shias, for example, Sufis, Hazaras, Ahmadiyas, all these Muslim communities, even Sunni Muslims who wouldn't abide by the strict strand of Wahhabism, Salafism, they wouldn't be respected in the country, and this continues even today. The Pakistani state has encouraged such radical strands, supported these radical madrasas and clerics who have preached these radical ideologies, such as Wahhabism and Salafism. This is a very rigid strand of Sunni Islam, which is of Middle Eastern origin. This is a strand of Islam that is seen to be more radical authoritarian, associated more with the Arab region, the Gulf region. Whereas the strand of Islam that took root in India has always been more moderate. But Pakistan deliberately distanced itself from its Indian heritage. It tried to move away from its Indian past. Right? I told you in the first class, all these countries were part of the same Indian civilization. Right? I'm not saying India, the country, the nation state of India. That is more modern. I'm talking about the Indian civilization. Right? All these countries from India to Afghanistan to Sri Lanka, Pakistan, they were all part of one ancient civilization. But Pakistan has tried repeatedly to move away from this past. It teaches the wrong history to its students. If you look at Pakistani textbooks, what is taught in their schools, in their madrasas, the wrong interpretations, the wrong history is being taught. Pakistan has tried associating itself with the Arab Middle Eastern linkage as part of its obsession with extreme faith. Please remember again what I told you in the last class. Problem is not with any religion, right? The same could have happened in India as well had we taken the same path, had we become a theocratic state. But thanks to our founding fathers, thanks to the constitution, thanks to our freedom fighters, thanks to the inherent secular nature of our freedom struggle and the Indian civilization, India took the secular path, right? We adopted a secular constitution. Maybe the word secular was not there, but inherently the constitution was secular, giving equal rights to all people, irrespective of their religion, caste, and any other divisions. Right? So, thanks to our founding fathers, the leaders of the freedom struggle, from Gandhi to Nehru to Sardar Patel to Subhash Chandra Bose, right? The revolutionaries, including Bhagat Singh and Ambedkar, right? Everyone. Their secular principles is what sustained India and what made India different. Today, if you see a stark difference between India and Pakistan, right? This is where the difference began. Pakistan became an inward-looking, conservative, radical, theological state, obsessed with religion, radicalism, and this was a misinterpreted version of religion. Right? So problem does not lie with religion itself. It is these elements, political elements, who misinterpret religion for their political interests. India, on the other hand, fortunately took the opposite path. Right? From the beginning, we established ourselves as a secular country with equal rights for everyone, where every minority group will be respected and given equal rights. That is what makes India a forward-looking country, an open democracy, right? So this fundamental difference defines our geopolitics even today. India being a secular country, Pakistan being a theological state. And the root for this lies in the communalization of our freedom struggle, which was done by the British. So understanding this logic is very, very important. This is what defines the psyche of the Pakistani elite. Right from the beginning, Pakistani leaders have tried to pitch Pakistan as an equal of India. There has been this obsession within the Pakistani leadership. Please don't assume that I am spewing hate against Pakistan. I'm not doing that. Please don't assume that we are discussing controversial topics and even religious topics. That's not the case. We are discussing what has happened in Pakistan. This could have happened with any other country as well, even India, if we had taken the same path, right? That's why I issued a disclaimer last week itself. We will be discussing sensitive topics, but religion is not the problem. You can't blame this on any religion. No religion preaches extremism, but you find strands of extremism in every faith, in every religion, right? Problem is not with Islam, right? You find strands of extremism in Christianity, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Judaism, in Sikhism as well. So there are these extremist radical elements, political elements in every faith. They misuse religion for their own narrow political interests. They twist the religious teachings, give it a wrong interpretation. So they misuse religion for their political and geopolitical interests. That is exactly what Pakistan did. It adopted a rigid strand of religion, deliberately promoted it, targeted religious minorities, and became this inward looking conservative state. It has constantly tried to break away from its Indian heritage, to break away from the moderate strand of Islam, which the Indian subcontinent was known for. And it is connected with the more rigid version of Wahhabism, Salafism, which is a feature of the Arab Gulf region. All right? Wahhabism and Salafism is a radical, misinterpreted version of Islam, which is the motivating ideology for various terrorist organizations. From Lashkar-e-Toiba to Islamic State to Al-Qaeda, Taliban, all these terror organizations, they are based on Wahhabist, Salafist ideology. It's a strand of Sunni Islam which is misinterpreted by political elements for political, geopolitical reasons. There are many countries to be blamed here, not just Pakistan. Even US, Saudi Arabia, few European powers during the Cold War period, countries like Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, even Israel, all these countries have deliberately nurtured the misinterpretation of religion. They have supported various radical and extremist and terrorist organizations for their geopolitical reasons. And we will keep studying this. We'll come to Afghan Taliban. We'll discuss Afghan Mujahideen later. You'll understand how the US played a role, how Saudi Arabia played a role in promoting Wahhabism and Salafism deliberately for geopolitics. They would support the misinterpretation of religion, create radical groups, support them, give them training, funds, and weapons for their geopolitical reasons. And Pakistan would do the same. Is that clear? It has tried breaking away from its South Asian linkages, its connections with the Indian civilization, and has tried connecting with more rigid ideologies. It has always tried to pitch itself as an equal of India from the beginning, right? That explains Pakistan's insecurity. Since the two countries were created under very hostile circumstances, right? As a smaller country with less resources, it was always insecure about India's larger size, about India's resources. This insecurity pushed the then Pakistani leadership, the state, that is the government, the armed forces, particularly the army, and its intelligence agency, the ISI, to constantly pitch Pakistan as an equal of India. In this attempt, in this obsession with India, right, Pakistan would commit major mistakes and commit atrocities that causes most of the problems that you have today. From Kashmir dispute to terrorism to Khalistan movement, they're all a Pakistani creation, right? That is what we'll be studying under this chapter. So please understand the core difference between the idea of Pakistan and the idea of India, right? It was the political extremism that led to the misuse of religion, that led Pakistan to become a theological state obsessed with radicalism, obsessed with India. India took the other path. As a secular country, as a liberal democracy, we took the opposite path, and that is what sustains India even today, right? We celebrate our diversity, we protect all communities, right? Irrespective of religion, caste, etc. Of course, there are problems in India as well. I'm not denying that. But there is a fundamental difference between the two countries and societies, and that's what makes the two countries different, right? It also explains why Pakistan is constantly obsessed with India, trying to target and undermine India. Now, this feeling in Pakistan, within the Pakistani state, it was aggravated in 1971. By 1971, we had already fought two wars, right? Pakistan's ambition was to capture Kashmir in 47. It couldn't do that completely. As Kashmir joined India, right? J&K merged with India. India fought back, pushed back the Pakistani troops and retook some of the captured areas. It made another attempt in 65 that led to the second war. Again, India defeated Pakistan's intentions. So already Pakistan had become a hostile country, right? Enemy nation as far as India was concerned. But then came 1971, where India played a direct role in breaking Pakistan into two parts. We studied this in detail under India Bangladesh, how the then Indira Gandhi government played a major role in supporting the liberation movement, how we waged a covert war, backing the Mukti Bahini rebels, how we supported Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Awami League, and Shanti Bahini, and gave them political diplomatic support. Finally, we waged an overt war and defeated Pakistan and broke the country into two parts. That's how East Pakistan broke away and Bangladesh was liberated by India. So, what happened because of this? As India played a direct role in liberating Bangladesh, this became Pakistan's biggest embarrassment. For Pakistan, it was a humiliating moment. It remains a humiliating moment even today. Even this drives the mentality of the Pakistani state. See, again, I'm not ranting about Pakistan here. I'm not just spewing hate at Pakistan. When I say Pakistan, I'm referring to the state, the government, the military, the intelligence agencies, not the people of Pakistan. There are many people in Pakistan who wish peaceful, friendly ties with India, just like there are many Indians who would wish friendly, peaceful ties with Pakistan, right? Because there are thousands of families that have been broken apart. Even today, it's been decades since many families were separated on both the sides, right? It has created a massive humanitarian crisis. Pakistan's economic problems, social problems, they're all traced back to this. So the fingers I'm pointing at is at the Pakistani state, not at the people of Pakistan. All right? So please remember this argument. Even in your answers, never ever target the whole country or the people. Don't do that. Stay away from what the media is telling you, right? Don't assume the whole of Pakistan is an enemy. It's not. There are millions of Pakistanis who want nothing than friendly ties with India, just like there are millions of Indians who want the same. The problem lies with the Pakistani leadership, the state, the government, the armed forces, the intelligence agency, and of course, the terrorist organizations and the radical outfits. So in 1971, when India broke Pakistan and liberated East Pakistan, that is Bangladesh, this was the most humiliating moment for Pakistan, right? It was massive embarrassment. Its country, more than half of its territory was gone. And India was responsible directly. India had played a direct role in aiding the liberation of Bangladesh. So following this defeat, Pakistan obviously held a grudge against India. It swore to take revenge against India for what India had done. It is believed that in the mid 1970s, somewhere around 1974, there was a top secret meeting at Rawalpindi. Rawalpindi is the headquarters of the Pakistani military establishment. This is where the Pakistani army is headquartered, right? It's very close to Islamabad. At Rawalpindi, apparently, there was a top secret meeting of all the top army generals, ISI officials, and the Pakistani government leaders. According to very credible sources who have written about this incident, India's intelligence agency, Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, had managed to infiltrate this meeting, meaning there was an Indian asset in this top secret meeting in Pakistan. This was after the 1971 war, right? Pakistan was contemplating its options, thinking how it can retaliate against India, how it can take revenge against India for breaking the country into two parts. And according to these very credible reports, it's very widely reported by various authors and former officials as well. India's RAW had infiltrated this meeting. We had an asset. There was a RAW asset in this meeting. And the intelligence that India got from this meeting was that a call was given. A call was given by all those present in this meeting to bleed India through 1,000 cuts. This was the exact quote that was made which was supported by all the leaders who were part of this meeting. The top army officials, ISI officials, and government leaders were part of it. The call given was bleed India through 1,000 cuts. Now, let me explain this. What does it mean? It was a reference to an unending covert proxy war against India. It was a promise they were making, a commitment, a call they had given to keep targeting India repeatedly, to hit India repeatedly and make 1,000 cuts so the country will bleed, the country will be destabilized and broken apart. This is nothing but a reference to the covert proxy war that Pakistan would escalate against India post 1970s. There is a reason why the Khalistan movement rose in late 70s and early 80s. There is a reason why insurgency terrorism started in Kashmir in 1980s, right? That's because Pakistan had made a promise to take revenge against India by bleeding the country through 1,000 cuts, meaning it had adopted a strategy, a new strategy of waging a covert proxy war that would last many, many years to destabilize India. That was the only objective. Because Pakistan had realized by 1970s that India is a conventionally superior power. It had realized that India cannot be defeated in a conventional war because it had lost 3 conventional wars. It lost 1947, 1965, and 1971. It didn't achieve any of the stated objectives in these 3 wars. I hope you understand what's a conventional war. A conventional war is where armed forces fight an open war. A conflict between your armed forces, your army, navy, air force, with the armed forces of the other country. That is a conventional war, right? Fought with traditional weapons in the open battlefields, on land, in the air, in the sea. That is a traditional war, a traditional conflict. So such conflicts are called conventional wars, which is fought with your conventional forces. So Pakistan realized by 1970s that India is superior conventionally. It has larger armed forces with better equipment, better training, better capabilities, right? It realized that it will never win a conventional conflict against India. And this was by experience. It had lost 3 conflicts. 1947, it didn't achieve its objective of capturing Jammu and Kashmir. Its designs on Kashmir again was defeated in 1965. And in 1971, we broke the country, right? Liberated Bangladesh. So this was a lesson that Pakistan learned. That conventionally India is superior. There's no point in fighting a conventional war. Because conventional wars are expensive and the human cost is very, very high. To fight a conventional war, you need large armed forces. You need millions of soldiers, right? You have to train them, recruit them, pay them salaries. You need large equipment. You need fighter jets. You need battle tanks, artillery guns, missiles. You need aircraft carriers, submarines, naval ships, helicopters. They're all very, very expensive, costing millions and millions of dollars. You have to spend billions and billions of dollars on your defense budget. And if a war ever were to take place in a conventional format, there would be large scale loss of life. Thousands, maybe millions of people, lakhs of people could get killed on both sides. So the cost of a conventional war is very high. That's why today conventional wars usually don't happen, right? No country can sustain a conventional war for a prolonged period because the money required is high. Any conflict, any war is about money, the business part of it, right? Where it is too expensive to sustain, no country or no company can do that, right? Similarly, in a conventional war, the human cost is high. So this option was not preferred by Pakistan after 1970s. See, Kargil was an exception. By the way, Kargil was not an exact war. It was not a full-fledged war. Kargil was a localized conflict limited to only the Kargil Dras Batalic sector, right? In conventional terms, Kargil was not a full-fledged war like 1971 or 1947. Is that clear? So by 1970s, Pakistan realized that conventional war is not an option against India. If it ever tries to do that, it will only incur more cost and it will suffer losses and damages. Now, of course, you might ask, hasn't Pakistan spent on military modernization? Hasn't Pakistan invested in all the military equipment? Of course it has, but it has built up its armed forces as a deterrence. Right? After 1971, we haven't seen any major conventional war between India and Pakistan. Right? Except for the Kargil localized conflict, we haven't seen any major war between the two countries because both countries know that they are formidable military powers. Right? And they became nuclear weapon states. They acquired nuclear weapons a few years later. So neither India nor Pakistan is foolish enough to head towards a conventional war. They know the risk, they know the consequences. They will end up losing their economy. They will end up losing a lot of people, including their soldiers, and potentially risk a nuclear conflict. So conventional war was ruled out by the Pakistani establishment. Instead, they adopted a new strategy. The strategy to bleed India through 1,000 cuts. The strategy was to bleed India through 1,000 cuts. What does it mean? It meant that Pakistan would wage a secret war. It would resort to unconventional options or non-conventional options. Instead of using large armed forces to fight, right? Because this war, as I told you, is expensive. It is unsustainable. You can't sustain this for many years. Russia-Ukraine war is a classic example, right? The US war in Afghanistan, US war in Vietnam, they are classic examples why conventional wars are not sustainable, right? Even these big powers, right? They're not able to get clear victories. Look at the American failure in Iraq, in Afghanistan and Vietnam. That tells you why conventional wars are complicated. Russia, being a superior military power, couldn't win over Ukraine because conventional wars don't go as you plan. And the cost is very, very high, right? The money involved, the human lives involved, both increase the risk factor. So you can't sustain these conventional conflicts. Maybe you can fight a conventional war for a few days, few weeks, maximum few months or a year or two. Beyond that, you'll reach a saturation point where you have to retreat and end the conflict. That's why most conventional wars end as a stalemate without a clear victory. Is that clear? 1971 was a rare outcome for India, but generally conventional wars don't give you an outcome. All right? So Pakistan realized that conventional wars are pretty much useless, that too when India has a superior edge. Either such a war will become very expensive and unsustainable, or it will not achieve any desired results. So what's the point in spending money in losing lives? So Pakistan adopted a clever strategy of using proxies, that is terrorist organizations, to target India. And this would be a secret war. So covert means secret. Through secret methods, Pakistan's ISI and its armed forces, these state actors, instead of them fighting India directly against Indian forces, they would support these non-state actors. They would support non-state actors like terrorist organizations to use them as proxies to target India. And the links between them would be covert or secret. This is what you mean by a covert proxy war. Covert means it's secret. The links between the sponsorer and the terror organization is hidden. It's concealed, right? You can't find direct evidence to link Pakistani establishment with these terror organizations because they're using their intelligence agencies to run a covert operation, a secret operation through which they fund, train, and finance them. And it's called a proxy war because Pakistan is not directly fighting this war with India. It is using a proxy instead. And the proxy is none other than the terror group. It's like how you put attendance for your friend, a proxy attendance for your friend in a classroom. Right? The teacher might be calling attendance, your friend would have bunked the class. And instead of your friend, you might call a proxy in his or her name. Right? It's something similar. Instead of Pakistan fighting this war against India, it's using terror groups as proxies to fight India. So by doing this, Pakistan can sustain and prolong such a conflict. Because covert proxy wars are cheap, the risk is low, and the outcome is higher. The impact is higher. The money required is less. You don't need costly equipment. You don't need billions and billions of dollars. Just a few thousand or maybe a few $1,000,000 is enough to fund terror organizations. You just give them a space to operate, create a ready base of radical groups and ensure that there is recruitment for these groups, provide them some basic training in using weapons, in building bombs, in carrying out basic terror attacks, right? Supply the basic weaponry needed, and then you sit and watch the high impact. It's easier to run these covert secret wars, these proxy wars. And moreover, it can be used again and again. It can be used to widen divisions in India. It can increase the communal divisions in India. Every attack from Pakistan could create large-scale communal divisions in the country. Essentially, it weakens the country, it eats the country within, right? That is when Pakistan started backing the Khalistan movement, Northeast insurgent groups. In fact, even before this, Pakistan had given support to Northeast insurgents in 1960s itself. That was its first major experiment in covert wars. But after 1970s, the support increased. Several Northeast insurgent groups got tremendous support from Pakistan in Bangladesh. We studied that under India-Bangladesh. Later, it would back Khalistan outfits and later promote terrorism in Kashmir as well. So it has waged this war for decades. It's almost 50 years right now. And still the secret war continues. So that is the advantage for Pakistan, right? It's a prolonged conflict, sustainable conflict, where it is not spending too much, the risk taken is less, but the returns, the impact is high. It keeps India on the back foot. It keeps India destabilized and widens the social divisions in India. That is what you mean by bleeding India through 1,000 cuts. Instead of delivering one major cut through a war, through a conventional war, Pakistani leadership swore to bleed India through 1,000 cuts delivered over a period of time. That is repeated acts of sabotage and destabilization, repeated acts of terrorism, right? In different parts of the country, at different points in time. So over a period, the Indian society will weaken, causing destabilization of the country, and that is the aim of the Pakistani state. That is what explains their obsession with terrorism, right? It is primarily to do with the element of revenge for 1971 and the fundamental ideological difference between India and Pakistan. These two are the driving factors, right? When India Pakistan were created in 1947, ideologically, fundamentally, we were different. The government, the societies were diametrically opposite. That is what created a base for radical ideologies in Pakistan. Pakistani governments have encouraged this. The army, ISI have encouraged it. After 1971, after losing East Pakistan, right, this became a preferred option for Pakistan to maintain its so-called equivalence with India. It has always tried to match India to keep itself on par with India. So that is what drives this Pakistani obsession with India. And the other important point here is that there is a dual power center in Pakistan. This is where we face a challenge. The world faces a challenge in dealing with Pakistan. In Pakistan, there is a dual power center. There is a dual control over power. The civilian government is like a puppet. It's there just for the sake of it. Pakistan is a democracy, a so-called democracy. On paper, it's a democracy. Elections happen as well. But in reality, the power is controlled by the deep state. The deep state of Pakistan. The hidden part of the Pakistani government, which is the army and the ISI. It's a well-known truth that the Pakistani army chief is much more powerful than the Pakistani prime minister or the president. The ISI chief is as powerful as the prime minister or the president of the country. So the elections, the democracy, the so-called democracy, right? The media, the judiciary, they're all for the sake of it. They're all controlled, dominated by the deep state of Pakistan, that is the army and the ISI. Is that clear? They either threaten the politicians, the judges, the journalists, or they force them. If they don't listen, to follow the orders of the army or the ISI, they will deal with them, right? Either they'll be kidnapped, they'll be tortured, or they'll be killed. This is very common in Pakistan. The deep state has this control over all the organs of the Pakistani state. All the big decisions, the major policy decisions of the Pakistani government is actually taken by the army and the ISI. Be it Pakistan's foreign policy, its national security policy, its military modernization, its nuclear weapons program. All these key areas of policy making is controlled not by the government, not by the prime minister, not by the president. It's by the army and the ISI. So if they don't like a leader or a government, they'll topple the government. Either the military will take over. There have been multiple military coups in Pakistan. The army, whenever it has had issues with the civilian leadership, they have simply thrown them out and captured power. The country has seen multiple military coups in the past. Is that clear? Or they remove the government. They topple the government and bring a new government, a new leader in place. See what happened with Imran Khan, right? He has been arrested, thrown out as the prime minister. What happened with Nawaz Sharif? What happened with Parvez Musharraf? There is a long history of such events where many Pakistani prime ministers and presidents, either they have been removed through unconstitutional methods, they have been arrested, they have been killed as well. This is the extent to which the army and ISI control the politics and the decision making within the country. Is that clear? Now, I'll tell you one more important point before I end this discussion. Today, you know Pakistan as a failed state, right? It's called a rogue state, a failed country, because its economy has collapsed. Right now, it's on the brink of economic collapse. If not for support from China and Saudi Arabia and UAE, by this point, Pakistan would have collapsed like Sri Lanka. All right, rather, Pakistan's crisis is actually worse than that. The inflation in Pakistan is massive right now. I don't know if you know this. Inflation levels are at 25 to 30%. Then Pakistan has no electricity. It is running short of electricity. It has no water supply. Basic services are not available in the country. Now, why am I telling this? In any other country, with such a situation, there would be riots. People will be on the street. They will target the government, the leaders, the army. They'll throw them out and they'll capture power. There would be a revolution. But this has never happened in Pakistan. Can you think about this? Can you think on these lines? Last year in Sri Lanka, when the economy crashed, right, the blame was on the Rajapaksa government, the Rajapaksa brothers. We'll study that under India-Sri Lanka. Immediately, the people rebelled. They targeted the Rajapaksa brothers, who were the president and the prime minister of the country, right? A revolution broke out and they threw them out. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Mahinda Rajapaksa, the president and prime minister respectively, they ran from the country. That is what happens in any country. When there is a complete economic collapse, if government is not providing the basic services, if there is massive corruption, right? If the state has failed, the economy has failed, no person will sit idly, right? People will not have jobs, they'll not have food, they'll not have healthcare, no power, no water. It will push people onto the streets, they will rebel, and whoever is in power, there might be bloody clashes as well. Many people might lose their lives. Eventually, people will win. They will throw such governments out. But any idea why this has never happened in Pakistan? Pakistan has faced these problems since decades. It has been a backward country, poor country, no education, no healthcare, no basic essential services. People have no employment opportunities, no great economic opportunities, whereas the elite have access to everything. You might have heard about this. There is a big division in Pakistani society. The top politicians, army generals, ISI generals, they are filthy rich. They have made millions and millions of dollars in personal wealth. All their children are studying abroad in US and Europe, settled safely away from the country, whereas they make the people suffer in the country. And still there is no revolution. Right? So can someone tell me why? What could be the reason? What could prevent this rebellion or revolution from happening? Don't tell me it's fear of the army. Fear of the army, domination of the army will only work to a certain extent. Beyond a point, people will not take it. I told you, even at the risk of losing their lives, people will rebel. It can happen in any country. If the economy collapses, if the government is responsible, if there is failure of governance, people will throw it out, irrespective of what power the army has, what the armed forces can do. There will be loss of life, but the revolution will be a bloody revolution. People will throw it out. There are examples. Look at the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, right? So it's not the fear of the army. That's not the answer. It's not the dominant influence of the army. That's not the answer. Okay, one or two students are getting it right. The answer lies in, see, Amit has got the right answer. Then Kishore, Amit, Kishore, Sahil, Ambesh, and few others. Very few people have got it right. Pakistan has managed to project a constant enemy, an outside enemy who can be blamed for all the problems. And who is that? It is India. This is the strategy of the Pakistani deep state. This is how they have deflected blame. They survive, they sustain, they don't face an internal rebellion because they constantly project India as enemy number one. So when there is a major existential threat from the outside, within the country, people will unite. They will sacrifice. People will think, my well-being is not important, my country's well-being is important. Ordinary Pakistanis, they're forced to think of these lines because they've been brainwashed. They've been taught the wrong history. They've been taught that India is a aggressive neighbor. They use 1971 as an example. And believe it or not, in Pakistani textbooks, India is the aggressor in 1971 war. They don't talk about the oppression of Bengalis, the genocide they carried out against Bengalis. They teach them that India attacked Pakistan and hence Pakistan retaliated. And then India broke the country into two. That is the extent of deep radicalization that exists. They have constantly managed to project India as an imminent threat, as an existential threat. Is that clear? Now, how do they do this every time? It's very simple. Whenever the army faces a problem, if there is a challenge to the authority of the army and the ISI, all they have to do is instigate India. How do you instigate India? Carry out a terror attack against India, a major terror attack. In fact, all the major attacks that have happened in India, they have not happened without any reason. All the big terror attacks, like Parliament attacks, for example, the Mumbai attacks, the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, these major attacks, they were well planned and there's a reason behind it. The reason was to unite all the forces in Pakistan because the Pakistani army was under pressure. When the army, the ISI come under pressure, They use India as an excuse. They use their proxies, terror groups, to target India. Carry out a big attack against India, automatically there will be anger in India. The Indian government will be saying things that will attack Pakistan, will take revenge, right? Indian armed forces will be making statements. People in India will be calling for revenge. That is enough for Pakistan to build back the unity needed, right? That is enough to project India as a constant enemy. They will use 1971 as an example, where India invaded their country, broke the country into two, right? So it's through a mix of fake news, misinformation, radicalism, right, and covert proxy war that Pakistan has managed to maintain that stability. People don't question the divide. They don't question why the army generals are so rich. They don't question the corruption. They don't rebel. Even if they don't have basic necessities, they still suffer, because generally, in general, they have been made to believe that India is a major threat, and the only one who can save Pakistan and the people is the army and the ISI. They have glorified the army and the ISI. They have shown army and ISI as the protector of the country, which is protecting them against the evil India. It is this image that they have successfully cultivated over years and years of manipulation. All right? That is why they don't see internal rebellions happening. Of course, there is an element of fear, right? If anyone stands up, they will be crushed. But that will hold only until a certain point. Beyond a certain point, people will rebel to such an extent that they don't care about the army's threats. They will throw the rulers out. It has happened in many, many countries, but never in Pakistan, because they have managed to shape public opinion. They've shaped public opinion in such a way that they have shown India as a constant threat, as enemy number one. If there are constant tensions between India and Pakistan, that is enough to cement the position of the deep state. The army ISI automatically become powerful and important to the people when there are tensions with India. And this is very easy for the deep state to do. To trigger tensions, all they have to do is use the proxy, carry out a major attack in India. By doing this regularly in the last 50, 60 years, they have projected the image that India is an imminent threat. India is aligned with all the other evil powers, targeting Pakistan, trying to destroy Pakistan. Right? By projecting this image, that is how the deep state has survived and sustained, and it has never faced a major internal rebellion. Even if a rebellion were to start, like you said, like the others said, they'll crush it. They'll crush it with force. But force will work only to a certain extent. Beyond a point, people can still throw out these corrupt governments. But by and large, there is a sense that India is an existential threat, so they need the army and ISI to protect them, to protect their nation. It is this wrong image that Pakistan has cultivated. All right? I'm stressing on these points because you have to understand the mindset of Pakistan, the mindset of the Pakistani leadership and the state, right? This is what explains the hostility, the constant hostile relations. Its usage of low-cost covert proxy wars. And this has entirely derailed the South Asia region itself. It's not just Pakistan which has paid the price. It has made all the countries in the region and in the world pay the price. Today, Pakistan has become a hub of terrorism and radicalism. It is single-handedly responsible for destroying Afghanistan. Is that clear? We'll study this in today's and tomorrow's classes. We'll keep studying how Pakistan destabilized Afghanistan, what role Pakistan had to play, how Pakistan has bred radicalism, terrorism primarily against India. Understanding this is very, very crucial for the exams. So with this, I complete the analysis of the strategy and approach of Pakistani state and the fundamental differences between India and Pakistan. All right. Now, what we will do is we will take a look at the timeline of all major events in India-Pakistan relations. We'll go in a chronological order from 1947 till now, and we will briefly examine all the major developments in the relationship based on what analysis we just discussed. Is that clear? We'll discuss all the problems, all the major issues and tensions in the relationship. Let's start with 1947. In 1947, India-Pakistan had been granted independence by the British. Finally, our freedom struggle had won independence, but the two-nation theory, right, became widely accepted due to large-scale communal divisions and communal violence across the country. Even though the Congress was opposed to it, eventually it had to accept the solution because there was no way that the two countries could be kept together. The violence had reached such an extent to such a point, right, that partition became the only practical viable option at a certain point. So the British, the Muslim League were largely responsible, along with all the radical forces. So finally, when the two dominions were created, the Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan, right? Two dominions were created before they could become independent countries. Now, this was provided under the Indian Independence Act of 1947. The British enacted the Indian Independence Act, through which India, Pakistan were granted independence. They were set up as new dominions, which would become independent sovereign countries. Now, under the Act, the various princely states that were there, they were given three options. There were hundreds of princely states, right? So princely states, which had a different relationship with the British Indian government, they were given the option either to join India, join the Indian Dominion and become part of the Indian Union, or they could join the Pakistani Dominion and become part of Pakistan, or they could opt for independence. The third option was also part of the deal. Princely states could opt for independence. They could choose neither to join India nor Pakistan and retain their autonomy and be independent kingdoms. And later, if they want, they could become independent countries. This was the arrangement created by the British following the independence of the country. So as the princely states had the option of either joining India or Pakistan or remaining independent, this would create numerous problems, particularly for India. And Pakistan would aggravate these problems by manipulating and working with certain princely states. In fact, many people assume that Pakistan's first interference was in Kashmir. That's not true. Even before Pakistan interfered in Kashmir, it meddled in one more place, that is Junagadh. Junagadh is today in Gujarat, in the Gujarat state of India. Back then, Junagadh was a princely state. It was ruled by the Nawab of Junagadh, but the population was a Hindu population, majority Hindu population, ruled by a Muslim ruler, by the Nawab. So Nawab of Junagadh, he expressed an interest to join Junagadh with Pakistan, not with India. Now we faced such challenges not just in Junagadh, there were many other princely states like Hyderabad, Travancore, then few other princely states in Madhya Pradesh, in Bhopal, Indore, right, in Northeast India, several regions from Manipur to Naga areas, right? There were many places where, even Kamtapur region in West Bengal, Assam, many princely states and many regions that were hesitant to join India or join Pakistan. And it was understandable because these monarchies, right, they wanted to retain their autonomy. They knew what would happen if they merged with India or Pakistan. So many wanted independence. They were hesitant to join India. Some were looking to join Pakistan. Our problem was some of these princely states were not even contiguous with Pakistan, meaning they were not geographically connected. So if we allowed some of the princely states to join Pakistan, we would be dealing with Pakistani enclaves all around the country. in several pockets at least, Junagadh, Hyderabad especially. Essentially, there would be islands of Pakistan surrounded by India, right? Similar to the land boundary issue. At least that was manageable because those were small villages. Imagine the whole of Junagadh, whole of Hyderabad being part of Pakistan and surrounded by India. That would have been a nightmare. So the Indian leadership was very clear. Prime Minister Nehru and Home Minister Sardar Patel, they were very clear that we cannot allow these mini Pakistans to come up at any cost. So the Indian leadership began negotiating with the princely states. First, they would try to convince them. They would try to make an offer, provide a deal, provide incentives to attract them. Right? That's why the practice of privy purse was started, where government would pay the royalties and not take over their personal wealth and their personal palaces. Right? Because the monarchs would give up all the other rights. They would become a normal, ordinary citizen by merging with a democratic India, just to boost their ego and project their ruler image. India agreed to make some concessions to the rulers. Some monetary benefits were announced. Title-based benefits were given to them. So such basic benefits were announced to attract and incentivize the kings to join India. Where incentives did not work, right, threats had to be used. Coercive talks had to be held. That's why Sardar Patel is known as the Iron Man of India, right? He would play a key role along with Prime Minister Nehru and other many top leaders and officials in holding these negotiations where incentives would be given, or if incentives didn't work, threats would be used, force would be used, and eventually, if required, military action or police action would be carried out to annex some of the territories. So the first major problem we faced was Junagadh, right? Parallelly, we had the issue in Hyderabad, we had the Kashmir issue coming up later. The Travancore kingdom was hesitant. Even Wadairs of Mysore at one point had slight hesitation about joining India. Like this, there were many empires and kingdoms who were hesitant. But problem in Junagadh was the Nawab wanted to join Pakistan. And India couldn't allow these mini Pakistani enclaves to come up. Because Junagadh, if you look at the map even today, it's quite far away from Sindh region. Right? It's right at the heart of Gujarat, surrounded entirely by India. So at any cost, we couldn't allow Junagadh to join Pakistan, but Pakistan started its interference. It started meddling. It started backing the Nawab, instigating the Nawab to push the Nawab to accede with Pakistan. Right? Because legally speaking, the Nawab had the right. The Act, the Indian Independence Act, allowed the rulers to decide whether they want to be independent or join India or Pakistan. So if the Nawab were to sign the instrument of accession, then technically, legally, Junagadh would become part of Pakistan. So to prevent this from happening, India had to act. So India would threaten the Nawab because incentives were not working. Talks and incentives didn't work. Finally, with threat and use of force, Junagadh was forcefully taken by India. It was a limited military police action. Indian forces would surround Junagadh. The Nawab had no other option and he ran away to Pakistan. He was sheltered in Pakistan. Even today, the Nawab's family, they are in Pakistan. So later, it was the minister, the then Wazir, Prime Minister of Junagadh, who would sign the instrument of accession with India, which formally merged Junagadh with India. Is that clear? So India had to annex Junagadh with force because every other option didn't work. Incentives and threats didn't work. Finally, Indian forces surrounded Junagadh. The Nawab ran away with the help of Pakistan, and the Wazir, right, would sign the instrument of accession as the legitimate leader, thus merging Junagadh with India. A very interesting point here. The son of the Wazir, right, the son of this prime minister who signed the instrument of accession, is none other than Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Bhutto would run away, right, as a youngster. He would run away to Pakistan and later become the leader of the country. But it was his father who signed the instrument of accession with India, merging Junagadh with India. To give this legitimacy, because we shouldn't be seen as an expansionist power, right? We were not like China, annexing, occupying others' territories. This was justifiably Indian territory, where Pakistan was creating problems by instigating the ruler, right? So to give it more international legitimacy, we even held a referendum. Essentially, a plebiscite was held. I hope you guys know what's a referendum or a plebiscite. Referendum is a direct election where people vote, cast a vote on a certain issue. Plebiscite is a referendum specific to sovereignty issue in a disputed area, right? A plebiscite is a direct election. It's a referendum essentially where people will vote to decide on which country they want to join. So people of Junagadh were given the option. We held a legitimate fair election after annexing the area, and majority of the people, as expected, voted for India. That way we got the people's support as well and international recognition. So it was not a forceful annexation that way, right? We were not taking over someone else's territory. We were simply respecting the people's wishes. So later, Hyderabad also had to be annexed in a similar manner, right? The Nizam of Hyderabad would also create a similar problem, saying that Hyderabad will be merged with Pakistan. And there was a role of the Pakistani state in instigating this move. Pakistan was instigating the Nizam, backing his demand to merge Hyderabad with Pakistan. And this was unacceptable to Nehru and Sardar Patel, right? No way India could allow a Pakistani island to come up right in the middle of India, that too in southern India, right? So eventually, a police military operation known as Operation Polo was carried out to annex Hyderabad. That's how Hyderabad became an integral part of the Indian Union. Now, why am I telling all of this? I'm pointing this out because to show Pakistan's role from the beginning to create problems for India. Remember, I told you that Pakistan has an obsession with India to place itself as an equal of India, to keep creating problems for India. These examples highlight that tendency. It shows that from the beginning, the Pakistani state and the leadership, they have this unhealthy obsession with India to keep targeting India, to keep destabilizing India. So what Pakistan did in the princely state of Junagadh and Hyderabad is just an example of highlighting its interference to destabilize India. The same would happen in Kashmir, that would lead to the breakout of the Kashmir conflict. Right? So let me cover this topic, and after that we can end today's session. Tomorrow we'll resume from here and we'll wrap up this topic. Jammu and Kashmir, I hope you guys know, was ruled by Raja Hari Singh of the Dogra dynasty. He belonged to the Dogra clan, and he ruled over a very unique kingdom, right? The Jammu region was Hindu dominated. Kashmir region was Muslim dominated. Ladakh was a separate state on its own at that point. The Ladakh region, however, was Buddhist dominated. But Raja Hari Singh, the then legitimate ruler of the kingdom of J&K, he had to decide whether to join India or Pakistan or remain independent. So Raja Hari Singh, just like every other king, weighed his options. And even Raja Hari Singh was hesitant. Just like the king of Travancore, the Nawab, the Nizam of Hyderabad, Nawab of Junagadh, the rulers of other princely states, leaders of other regions in Northeast India, just like they were hesitant, right? They were against joining India. Similarly, Raja Hari Singh was hesitant and later took a stand against joining India. At the same time, he didn't opt for Pakistan as well. He opted for independence because he saw that he is ruling over a unique set of subjects, right? There are Hindus in Jammu region, Muslims in Kashmir region, and he himself is from the Dogra clan. So he didn't see a future for him, for his kingdom and his people by joining India or Pakistan, because Pakistan was already a theocratic state. Minorities were already being targeted and oppressed. So Raja Hari Singh knew what will happen if J&K merged with Pakistan. Similarly, he had concerns about India as well, as India eventually would be a Hindu majority nation, right? Even though it's a secular country, right? Eventually, the majority population are Hindus. So as the Raja, as the leader, he had a concern, right? So keeping the welfare of his subjects in mind and his own personal interests as well, he opted for independence. So technically, don't take offense for me saying this because we live in very sensitive times. J&K was independent for a short period of time. Technically, legally speaking, J&K was neither part of India nor Pakistan. It was an independent kingdom because the legitimate ruler had made the choice. Understood? As per the Indian Independence Act, he did not sign the instrument of accession, right? He didn't decide to merge with Pakistan or India, and he opted for independence, thus making J&K independent for a brief period of time. Please understand this point. It's very, very important. Many have a wrong assumption that J&K was always a part of India. If you're talking about India, the nation state, no, J&K was not a part of India at the beginning. It was neither part of Pakistan. Raja Hari Singh, the legitimate ruler, had opted for independence as per the Indian Independence Act. So legally speaking, technically speaking, J&K was independent, neither part of India nor Pakistan. All right. Now this is where Pakistan exploited the opportunity. Pakistan kept its eyes on Kashmir in particular, right? Not just because of the Muslim population, but also because of the resources and the location. J&K has a strategic location. Look at the map where Kashmir is located. It's a vital link between Central Asia, South Asia, and China. Right? Since ancient medieval times, J&K, the Kashmir region, has been a vital link connecting with Afghanistan and Central Asia, connecting with today's Tajikistan, Fergana Valley region, connecting with China and Xinjiang since historical times. It has been a trade route. It has been a cultural route, sharing influences from South Asia to Central Asia to China. So historically, Kashmir has a lot of significance. All right. And even strategically, from a geopolitical point of view, from a military and strategy point of view, J&K has a vital location and it is blessed with resources. So Pakistan kept its eye on the location of J&K, its significance and resources, and of course the Muslim domination of Kashmir region, and it tried to illegally capture J&K from Raja Hari Singh. The Pakistani army launched an operation known as Operation Gulmarg, under which the army backed the tribals in this region, right, in parts of Kashmir, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Gilgit-Baltistan. These tribal groups were backed by the army to make it look like an organic tribal invasion, to hide the involvement of Pakistani army. So Pakistani army soldiers, they also dressed like the tribals, and they carried out a tribal invasion backed by the Pakistani state and the army. This military operation was called Operation Gulmarg, which was an illegal attempt by Pakistan to capture J&K for itself. So Pakistani troops, with the support of tribal militia, they succeeded in capturing large parts of J&K from Raja Hari Singh. Because Raja Hari Singh didn't have the resources, nor a strong military to stand up to a Pakistani attack. Eventually, J&K was on the brink of collapse. Right? Within days, Pakistan would have taken over the entire part of J&K. At this critical point, Raja Hari Singh reached out to India asking for support. He knew that J&K would not survive without India's support. So Raja Hari Singh would ask for India's help. So from India, the condition was very simple. Both Nehru and Patel, right, they accepted the offer that we will merge J&K with India. Raja Hari Singh had agreed to sign the instrument of accession. This was what India expected. Right? India couldn't deploy troops if it was independent territory, if it was foreign territory. So the condition of India was Raja Hari Singh has to sign the instrument of accession. At that point, please understand, Raja Hari Singh was still the legitimate ruler. The kingdom of J&K still existed, the princely state. Right? Even though it had opted for independence, it still had an option to join India. So the moment Raja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession, legally, the whole state of J&K as it existed became part of India. This is the position of India even today. See, Pakistan might have occupied the territories, but even before the invasion, the act was very clear that if the legitimate ruler signs the instrument of accession, then the merger is legal and valid. So Raja Hari Singh would sign the instrument of accession later, but still the whole state of J&K as it existed, even before Pakistan occupied the areas, would belong to India. It would fall under India's sovereignty. And this is the basis of India's claim even today. We claim the whole state of J&K as it existed in 1947 before Operation Gulmarg because the legitimate ruler Raja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession. Is that clear? That is how J&K merged with India, and immediately Indian troops were deployed to fight back against Pakistani invasion. Is that clear? But Raja Hari Singh also had a condition. Before signing the instrument of accession, he urged Nehru and Patel to provide concessions, provide a special status to the people of J&K. Raja Hari Singh was genuinely concerned about his subjects, about merging J&K with a Hindu majority India. So he asked for concessions in the future constitution that India would adopt. He had asked for a promise that a special status would be given to protect the rights, the culture, and the identity of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Because J&K was joining India under very difficult circumstances. That is the reason why Article 370 and 35A were later introduced into the Constitution of India. Understood? This was a promise made to the people of J&K, to Raja Hari Singh, that J&K will merge with India through the instrument of accession. India will defend J&K against Pakistani invasion and provide for special protection to the people, to protect their land, their rights and culture, because the state was joining India under difficult circumstances. This is where critics point out that the revocation of special status, it revokes the promises made by India to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. All right? So that is one reason why critics oppose the revocation of special status even today, even though it has been removed. Right? They still base this argument on these lines, that it was a commitment made by India to Raja Hari Singh, to the people of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, that a special status would be given in the constitution to protect your land, your culture, your identity. Because similar status has been given to several parts of Northeast India. All right? Of course, that's an entirely different discussion altogether. But do know the basis for providing this special status later in the constitution. That's why J&K was allowed to have its own constitution. Right? The state legislature, the state government would be given its own autonomy from the orders of the government and the laws passed by the parliament. Right? That extent of autonomy was given based on these commitments that were made. Now, coming back to the India-Pakistan war. As soon as J&K merged with India, India declared war on Pakistan. The Indian army would be deployed in Jammu and Kashmir to fight back against the invasion, and India successfully recaptured some of the occupied areas. We pushed back the Pakistani troops. All right? The troops had come very close to Jammu. Parts of Jammu had been taken. Almost entire Kashmir had been taken. From all these areas, right, Indian troops liberated these regions, took them back. And after a few months of conflict, Prime Minister Nehru called for a ceasefire. Prime Minister Nehru called for a ceasefire after India retook some of the captured areas, but we were yet to take back all the areas that Pakistan had taken. So at this point, a ceasefire was called, and India unilaterally took the matter to the United Nations. Right? Now, this decision of the Prime Minister happens to be very controversial and debatable. Like I told you, without taking political sides, without showing political biases, let's evaluate the decision for what it is. See, today it's easy to look back and pass judgments saying that it was wrong to take the matter to the UN. It's also easy to say that the right decision was taken by taking the matter to the UN. Right? Both sides of the argument have some validity. So as UPSC aspirants, we have to show the maturity to look at both sides of the argument and appreciate what both sides of the argument are telling us. Of course, this decision is very controversial, right? But also look at the circumstances under which the decision was made. India was struggling not with one problem. Kashmir was not the only problem we had. There were multiple similar problems across the country: massive poverty, famines, hunger, no basic essentials available. Our economy had to be built from scratch. Many other princely states and kings creating problems, right? Creating the Indian Union became a huge headache. On the other hand, constitution making process was another major challenge. Insurgency had started in northeast India. Naga groups had declared insurgency from August 15, 1947, right? So the Indian state was dealing with multitude of problems, from security to internal problems to economic problems, social problems. It was a priority for India to settle these disputes as soon as possible. There were other areas which needed attention and focus. And don't forget the limitation of the Indian armed forces. Continuing the war would have meant prolonging the conflict, imposing more economic burden, and also the terrain of J&K. Right? The Indian army had very limited resources. What the British left behind, right, was a very poor state of armed forces, without the right equipment, no airlift, right, with limited resources and capabilities. So prolonging the conflict would mean risking more lives, risking more money, and without without a guaranteed outcome. So this could be one of the bases that pushed India to take the matter to the UN. The other basis was we put faith in the UN. As a new responsible nation, United Nations gave us hope. After the Second World War, the UN had been set up. And as a responsible, newly independent country, we placed our faith in the UN, hoping that UN would give us a fair solution. But yes, it can also be argued that we did make a mistake. Right? Various leaders, governments, experts have acknowledged this. Taking this matter to the UN turned out to be a big mistake because it would bring third parties into the conflict and strengthen Pakistani position. But could India have retaken all the occupied areas? Practically, it is doubtful. Did India make a mistake by calling a ceasefire? Not really. Calling a ceasefire was essential to end the war and work out a mediated settlement. Right? We had fought for independence through a peaceful method largely. Right? Our freedom struggle was largely peaceful based on talks and negotiations. What country would India would be if we resorted only to force? So there were many options and arguments that would have influenced the decision making at that point. Yes, strategically looking back, you can say it's a mistake, but at that point, it seemed like the right option, hoping for a fair settlement from the UN. But as expected, India and Nehru himself would realize that this was backfiring. The United Kingdom, especially as a permanent member, would show a bias towards Pakistan. As UK had more issues with India, right? India was the one which largely led the freedom struggle, broke out to become a secular country, right? And took a stand against imperialism. We joined with African and Asian countries and all former colonies to oppose British imperialism. So Britain always had that element of hatred, racial bias towards India. So at the UN, we saw UK taking a side with Pakistan, and the third party involvement became challenging for India. All right. Through the UN, the ceasefire was formalized, and this line became the ceasefire line that was formally agreed to under the Karachi Agreement of 1949. Remember, under Shimla Agreement, I mentioned the Karachi Agreement of 1949. So Karachi Agreement was finalized that ended the war, and whatever positions we held, the ceasefire, wherever the ceasefire was called, when we took the matter to the UN, that became the ceasefire line, the de facto boundary between India and Pakistan in the Kashmir region. And the UN gave itself a role. It appointed military observer groups on both the countries, on both the sides, to monitor the ceasefire, to ensure that neither India nor Pakistan break the ceasefire. And another promise that was made was that plebiscite will be held to decide the future of Jammu and Kashmir. Both India and Pakistan agreed to go back and hold a plebiscite, that is, hold an election, allow the people of J&K to decide whether they want to be part of India or Pakistan or remain independent. Is that clear? This is how the first war came to an end, and ceasefire line became the de facto boundary. And UN military observer groups were set up on both sides of Kashmir to monitor the ceasefire. But this promised plebiscite has never been held. The plebiscite that India-Pakistan promised was never conducted because Pakistan started changing the demography. India saw that it was bringing people from other parts of Pakistan and settling them in POK. It was trying to change the population, the demography, so that if the election takes place, the election will be manipulated. So by looking at Pakistan's interference, India decided never to hold the plebiscite. And also India was not happy with the way in which UN had handled the matter, right? The favor should have been in favor of India. Rather, it was seen towards Pakistan. India already had doubts about the UN and its neutrality, right? So we were looking for an option to throw UN out of this equation. So India decided never to hold the plebiscite, given that Pakistan was already manipulating the situation on the ground. It was trying to bring new population from Punjab and other parts of Pakistan and trying to settle them in POK, so that when elections are held, elections can be manipulated. So India rejected the plebiscite. We never held the plebiscite. And of course, Pakistan also has never held the plebiscite. And that is how the J&K issue got created and persists and remains even to this day. Is that clear? So let's stop the discussion over here and we'll resume this tomorrow. We'll talk about the developments that happened after this. We will come back to Kashmir. We'll discuss the LOC, which we covered under India-Bangladesh. I'll make a mention about that again. And we'll cover other important developments, including the current state of relations. So this is what we are left with. And we'll look at India-Afghanistan as well. So let's meet tomorrow. I think this should be enough for today. I'll just take a look if there are any questions here. Bhagyashri is asking, is there any failure of BIMSTEC? Not as of now. BIMSTEC has done quite well in the last 7 years. It has taken many big initiatives, as we discussed. Prashant is asking why India is not declaring Pakistan a terrorist country. We have openly called Pakistan a state sponsor of terrorism, right? Terrorist country would not be the right word. That is too undiplomatic, right? We call Pakistan a state sponsor of terrorism, meaning the Pakistani government, the state is sponsoring terrorism. Kambampati is asking, any movies based on true events connecting India, Pakistan? Don't learn through movies. Movies are creative. They would have taken creative freedom. They are not facts, right? From movies, you can't learn history or geopolitics. Don't do that. It's good for your entertainment, good to get some gist from that, but don't learn from movies, right? That's not the right approach. Definitely not for UPSC exam. Difference between insurgents and terrorists. We will address this under internal security. It's a very big topic. To understand what's insurgency, what's terrorism, I need a good 1.5 hours to explain that. We will do that under internal security. We have a separate subject, internal security, where we deal with terrorism and insurgency. So there we will get into it, not in IR. All right, so please hold on. All right, so guys, these are the questions. I hope today's session was good. I hope you have understood everything. Let's wrap up. We will see you again tomorrow and we'll resume the discussion from here. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.